Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Big Idea Exchange 2021. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Kelly McCoy. I'm the Strategy Chair here at Naval Postgraduate School. Today, you'll be hearing from 6 different students as they present to 12 senior leaders and mentors. Senior leaders and mentors range from retired 4-stars to retired colonels and captains to mad scientists, as well as leading academics here at NPS. With that, I just want everybody to know once again that this is an unclassified event. We will have no classified or FOUO type discussions. Everything said is on live stream, so please keep that in mind. With that, in order to introduce the panel, I'd like to pose a question and filter through each member of the panel by seniority, given this question. What is the next big idea that we need today in order to succeed tomorrow? First, we have Admiral Thomas Harvey.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for including me in this. You know, as I started to think about the question, I think maybe the next big idea is 100 or maybe 1,000 little ideas that are really good. And let me put that in kind of a national security context for you. If you look at places like Asia and the Pacific, where Bob and I spent a lot of time, and one of the critical issues right now with China is how to deter China from taking hostile action in East or Southeast Asia. And when you look at the solution to that, it's not going to be any one idea. I mean, it's going to be a whole compendium of really good thoughts. And some of it will deal with military technology. Some of it will deal with military strategy and posture. A lot of it will deal with economics, pain points, maybe interdicting the Belt and Road, thoughts like that. Probably 100 or so that taken together will deter China. Another area I chair an electric utility, and of course one of the things that is right in the forefront is climate change. We look about moving forward and getting to net zero. We're not going to get to net zero with one idea or one solution. Coming up with firm renewable generation is going to be a series of ideas that are going to get us to that point. There may be a big idea in one location. It could be nuclear power, for example. In most places, it's going to be technologies, whether it's batteries, hydrogen, technologies that we haven't fully matured yet, by that firm generation will stabilize the grid. So my guess is today we're going to see a lot of smaller but great ideas that kind of fit into that particular thought.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I'd like to pivot to the virtual panel. General Brown, how about yourself?
Well, thanks very much. First, let me say thank you for allowing me to participate. I'm really excited about big ideas, and boy, do we need them. So this is it's a great idea. Admiral Fargo, great to see you. I wish I was there with you. I love Monterey. Wish I could have been there. I think you're spot on with a lot of big ideas, a lot of little ideas that form those big ideas. But I think we're facing a challenge we've never seen before in that deterrence has changed. We'll have 2, I'm going to call them peer-capable nuclear competitors, not near peer, but already peer-capable in China and Russia, and this return to great power competition. So requires certainly the nuclear deterrence, but the conventional deterrence, and that's where we really need the ideas, because we are the most joint force in the world, but we're still not joint enough. And we've got to figure out, these folks, they've read our playbook, and we've got to come up with different ways to present multiple dilemmas to them. And whether you call it multi-domain, all domain, under the joint warfighting concept, that's the next level for that conventional deterrence that will actually work in this in this 21st century. I think the Secretary of Defense, Austin, rightly called it integrated deterrence, and I think that's a great way to describe it. And so I think those a lot of little ideas, as Admiral Fargo mentioned, in the area of how to truly get us integrated as a joint force and seamless to be able to have that conventional deterrence we need, coupled with a nuclear deterrence. So that would be my my input on this. And again, I'm glad to be participating. Very excited to hear the presentations, and they look like they're going to come up with some great ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have back here in the room with Lieutenant General Brucier.
Thanks, Colonel McCoy, and hey, thanks, General Brown. Appreciate your comments as it relates to deterrence, harbor-facing cargoes. So I guess here's what I'd offer to the collective team that's on Golden. Well, I think the big idea is the idea, right? So the strength of our nation and the strength of the Department of Defense is the intellectual power that institutions like NPS create. And those won't give you the statistics, but the United States of America is no longer leading in STEM. So the big idea from a civilian perspective needs to be, how do we bring in our youth and encourage them and excite them in the passion of science and technology, mathematics, because we need it. So that's point number one. The second point I'll make is to General Brown's comments, is we need to look at the world as which it is, not the world we wish it to be. And the threats that we face today and in the future demand that we approach how we prepare for any potential adversary. I'm also encouraged by Secretary Austin's multi-domain integrated deterrence concepts that we're going to be working on. But the intellectual power of institutions like NPS and those other service and civilian institutions is where we're going to get the big ideas. And I'd offer to you the challenges are many. The threats are real. Now's the time to collectively get together and approach that. Really excited about being here today and really excited about hearing the students' big ideas. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. We'll transition over to Vice Admiral Rondeau.
And thanks, Colonel, and it's wonderful to be on this panel, and I want to say that Admiral Fargo taught me a lot when I worked for him. And it's part of the big idea. So, Joe Brown, if you will forgive me, one of the big ideas is to understand how everything comes together in order to make something work. And in this case, thinking about strategic deterrence, not only as an aspect of the military, as an aspect of the domestic realm. How to understand our need and our capabilities towards what we have as a nation, as much as what we have as a global military power, and bringing together those things. So one of the thoughts is, how do we understand how to make things work again as a nation? And that's really an important piece. Because big ideas lay fallow if we don't have a culture that prizes them and then finds a way to make them work. Which goes to my second one, is the notion of adoption. Adoption, a mindset that will adopt new ways of doing things. A bureaucracy that will adopt and make things work more quickly and at a higher speed. Adoption of innovation and innovative ideas, and adoption of application capability. The whole notion of education, of the integration of thoughts and ideas, and the kind of conversation that has made this country fabulously successful, about the openness and the adopting of things. You can't do that if you don't understand. So I would say that the second thing is adoption. Third thing goes to General Bousier's comment about STEM. We are a country that needs to reestablish our foundations in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I say this as a history major. I used to study the history of science. And it's really important that we have basic capability in order to do that. That is an additive to our power and our influence and our strength. So my notions about the big thoughts and ideas are the vehicles to make the big ideas real. Adoption, a nation that has ability to see how things come together and make them work, and then the technical and capabilities of thank you, Colonel.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, we have Dr. Vivian May.
Well, now I know where mad scientist comes in. Hello, Lieutenant General and Rear Admiral. So I guess I should somewhat introduce myself since I'm coming from the outside here. I started my professional career as a theoretical neuroscientist, most recently at Stanford and Cal. And then I had the terrible idea of doing a startup in AI applications in education, and I got hooked. I just started my 6th company recently. I sat on the boards of a number of others. And given the nature of work that I would do, I would say it'd be easy to say some really provocative idea. I do a lot of work with cyborgs, to be perfectly blunt about it, neuroprosthetics and neurotechnologies. I sit on the boards of 4 companies in that space right now, and it is amazing what we are on the verge of seeing. But in fact, I think we've all kind of agreed here that it's a human capacity issue that's really at play. Even that comment about brains is really a human capacity one. I want to echo the idea that ideas are the idea and that many of them are at play. Moonshots are few and far between. My life is built around a simple idea. I run a philanthropic lab. If people need help, they come to me. Our country doesn't know what to do about education problems. My daughter has 500 seizures a day, please save her life. Our company knows we have bias in our promotions, but we don't know how to identify it. And if I think my team and I can help, then I pay for everything, and if we come up with a solution, we just give it away. It's the worst startup idea of all time, and I hope I get to do it for the rest of my life. And while there is limitation in STEM education, what is really identifiable is understanding what to do with it. What actually solves a problem in the real world. Not that you know what an inverse Wishart distribution is, but you understand how knowing that might actually change someone's life, including insecurity. And so for me, the big idea is jerks like me are building AIs that can do a huge range of routine labor, including things that require years and years of intensive education. What's left is the creative. And we have no clear policy in my mind, either in the public sphere or outside, of how we develop a creative person that knows how to do something, but also knows why and the impact it will have on the world. We turn out, we're looking at maybe 1% of the US population and a trivial percent of the global population are part of the creative labor pool. Even a small shift in that number would be transformative. I would love to see that play out in the American military and NATO and abroad. I get the chance to do briefings with various groups. But I just want to see this. I believe in a world in which people having a sense that their contributions mean something and will have an impact on the world is one that I want to live in, even if those people happen to be in Russia and China, because I believe that that would bring stability. Social cohesion from feeling like I just do what I'm told is a really unhealthy thing here and everywhere. So there you go. I'm always right about everything. So log it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Dr. Joe Phelp.
Great. Thanks for the chance to join in. What a great panel. Colleagues and mentors of mine, Bill Brown, so I served in the OSD policy in the last administration. I had the South Asia, Southeast Asia, Oceania portfolio. So really working with the allies and partners that we were going to try to. So that experience was, the bad news was we are losing our advantages in so many metrics, certainly China, technology, supply chain security, military capabilities. And so the thing is, we're losing what we haven't lost yet. So a lot of reasons to be very concerned. But my experience was a lot of good news too. As I traveled the region, there was a thirst for American leadership. Allies and partners who wanted to work with the United States, they wanted us to be present, had to show up. And I would say that we had a shared vision that was embraced, whereas the alternative was one that had been imposed. So I'd say that the big idea I would like to emphasize here, based on my background, is it's not just the U.S. head-to-head with China. That's a very, very disappointing lineup. But if it's the U.S. allies and partners and all the thousands of ideas we can collectively bring together and collaborate and work on together, we've got enormous comparative advantage. And I think the big idea is we haven't leveraged those to the greatest effect. Our ability to leverage our network of allies and partners is really America's strengths and the strength of all the countries around the world who have a shared similar vision. So the big idea is don't squander that comparative advantage. I think a lot better, and what we can. And I think that we include technology cooperation, supply chain security. There's so many areas where we bring everyone to the table, allies and partners. We're going to prevail in this great power competition that we're going to be in for some time.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Peter Denning.
Hi. Repeat the question you asked at the beginning.
What is the big idea that we need today in order to be successful tomorrow?
This is it right here. We've been teaching our students, coaching our students, helping them bring forth their big ideas, ideas that are likely to be transformative for the United States and the military, teaching them how to do this. This is the biggest advantage we could possibly have is leadership, our young leadership, being able to transform the world and bring their ideas into adoption. We often talk about, when we talk with our students and talk about innovation, the valley of death, which is some metaphorical, awful territory you don't want to enter because a lot of people never get through to the other side. We're teaching our students how to do this. We're preparing them to navigate through the valley of death. Sort of like, as I like to say, the old U.S. American Br'er Rabbit tale. It says, Br'er Rabbit says, please don't throw me into the brambles. So they decide to throw him into the brambles, and of course that's his native territory and he can navigate around. But we're teaching our students to be like that. You throw them into the valley of death and they know how to navigate. They go through the other side and they enjoy the process and they get something done. That's what we think we're doing, and I think this is truly the biggest idea we have around here. We're showing it to you today.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Orskine.
Thank you. As a professor of oceanography and battlespace environment, I am very familiar with doing things from a quantitative nature using. So along those lines, one of the things that I would like to bring to a greater perspective in all areas of our application, quantification of uncertainty. I speak with my non-scientist friends and they say to me, oh, but science is black or white. And I say, oh, no, not at all. In fact, it's really the quantification of uncertainty that gives you the power to understand what the transformative idea is. So with all of these things that are proposed, being able to say, with some level of certainty or uncertainty, this is the likelihood of success, I think will be one of the biggest transformative. What we do at NPS, which I think leads to that, is teaching our students to be critical thinkers. And it's this very difficult thing to quantify how well we do this, but through things like thesis work and through classes and through Peter's class that does this innovation adoption, we can start to create those leaders who will be able to understand the uncertainty and then be able to propagate their ideas forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Captain Jeff Klein.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm the director of the Naval Warfare Studies Institute here at the Naval Postgraduate School. My comments will probably reflect that current position. I'm going to title them, as Pogo once said, that we've met the enemy and they are us. I haven't seen in the last 25 years any greater promising technologies that occurred out of Silicon Valley or at NPS, but the problem is adoption, exactly what the president said. And I'd like to operationalize that just a little bit. Dr. Ming represents opportunities-based acquisition and venture capitalist acquisition. We still have an industrial-based, requirements-based aspect. Our good ideas take 5 to 10 years to be adopted by the forces. What we really need is a DoD skunk works, something that will require congressional legislation and partnership. But a skunk works that scans for those emerging technologies and capabilities, develops those emerging concepts of deployment, models them, tests them, war games them, prototypes them, and takes them field experimentation, and then jumps that valley of death immediately to acquisition. They require legislation, but we have to have that, because what we're going to hear today is opportunities, not requirements. And to get those opportunities to the fleet and to our forces, we need a rapid way to do that and make that institutional.
Thank you, sir. And last for the end room, we have Colonel Todd Lyons.
So great to be here with all of you. I'm representing the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation, as well as being a colleague of Peter Denning, teaching innovation leadership. We go back to the Marine Corps, fundamental doctrinal publication. We have a belief that tempo is a weapon. And the comparative advantage in the current operational environment is education. Speed to adoption is the ability to adapt to the current world. And that's what Naval Postgraduate School alumni are doing. That's what the students today are going to be about. And ultimately, that's the value proposition of Naval Postgraduate School to the Department of Defense, is how do we drive these new practices into adoption into the Department of Defense. And it's no surprise that you heard that word adoption about a dozen times from each person speaking today, because it's not do the practices exist. The question is how quickly and how well are we going to be able to drive that adoption to support the Department of Defense.
Thank you, sir. Transitioning over to our virtual panel, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Valerie Jackson. I think we have you on mute.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here.
Good to go.
Good now?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to speak not only as Mrs., but also as Colonel in the reserves. And what I'm going to talk about is just an overarching theme, I think, that everybody has touched on. I think our biggest need today is talent exploitation. We need to leverage the expertise that we have, and I'll talk about just our service members. I don't think we do a great job at that. They are our strategic overmatch, and we need to do a better job by changing policies that allow them to really, bring their full potential to bear on all these very pressing national security problems. We need to make it easier for people to go from active duty to reserve duty and then back again. We need to change policies that allow, time for work-life balance. We need to allow, better and broader educational opportunities. And we, in general, need to make, the service life attractive to the younger generations. What they see in the service, what do they see themselves? Do they see the potential, the chance to really, get their skills to bear on a national security problem? If they don't see that vision, they'll never join, and if they do join, they'll never stay. So I think we need to do a really huge revamp of our personnel policies to really exploit the talent that we have in the services now and then for the future. So happy to be here, happy to represent Marine Corps University and the Krulak Center, and I'm really looking forward to the student presentations. Thanks.
Thank you. And last up, we have Ms. Rikonen.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for having me today. It's awesome to see you all. My name is Ainiki, and I'm a researcher at the Center for New American Security in Washington, D.C., and my focus is national level tech policy issues. For me, the challenge of technology competition is that it's immensely interdisciplinary. So it touches military, economic, and diplomatic power. And it also requires the coordination of all tools across government so that we can coordinate with allies and partners, so that we can engage with the private sector innovation base and even determine what trustworthy and cost-effective emerging tech should even look like. So it encompasses everything that's not just, electromagnetic spectrum management or R&D spending, but also building norms of technology governance, or navigating trade issues like using multilateral export controls to secure semiconductor supply chains and to do it without tanking the economy while we're at it. These areas have whole of nation and also whole of government effects, and it's important that we can coordinate and manage them in advance. And so my big idea, and granted there's nothing really new under the sun, but DoD can't do tech alone. It's really critical that we have better high-level interagency coordination that's committed to emerging tech and a really interdisciplinary understanding of how to harness emerging technologies for national interests, broadly defined, not just national security. So I'm really excited for today's presentations. What I've seen so far is that they're not just about innovation for innovation's sake, but also about effective applications, processes, and ultimately how people and technology can work together to achieve the mission. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to lay out quick rules of engagement. I've told the speakers once they've completed to stay up here, they'll address questions, comments from the in-person panel, and then from the virtual panel afterwards. As with any plan with first contact, it's likely to fail. And if that's the case, the students are ready to run with it, and I'll provide supporting fires as necessary to try to keep us on time. So with that, hit the next slide. I'd like to introduce Major Larry Wingington. Thank you.
Future conflict is not going to be fought with autonomous or semi-autonomous systems. Current ones are. And the force that can better leverage these systems and understand the spaces that they operate will have a decisive advantage. DoD has realized this. We've invested in organizations and agencies like the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. The Navy and the Army both have artificial intelligence task force. And the Navy's even trying to acquire certain systems that are autonomous, that are capable of autonomous control, like Sea Hunter. So now, let's imagine you're a Marine. You're on your second deployment, and over the last few years, you've held a variety of billets. Team leader. For this one, you're going to be the squad systems operator. And over your pre-deployment training, in the last 3 months of your deployment, you've successfully integrated a new autonomous communication system into how your squad operates. It's a phenomenal asset. It's provided your team with constant communication on your patrols. It allows for seamless data transfer. Gives you intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets throughout your patrols, all with little effort from you as the operator. So now, you're an hour into your patrol. You're in a new area. Suddenly everything goes dark. There's gunfire, rockets. Your team's caught in a complex ambush. There were never any indications that this would have been an area of concern. Your squad had done everything right. They've varied their patrol routes. They've maintained proper operational security. And they've had the proper security measures in place to address these things. What you didn't know, that Benedict Arnold was on your team. The autonomous systems that you employed, the enemy was able to observe your autonomous system, exploit its information. They knew exactly where you were going to be when you'd be there. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Major Larry Wingington. And today, I'm going to talk about how we should look at artificial intelligence systems differently. The DoD has been investing in autonomous vehicle research for quite some time. In fact, in 2017, Naval Postgraduate School conducted a series of experiments aimed at teaming artificial intelligence, manned and unmanned systems with a ground force. What you'll see in this video are these autonomous systems, autonomous UAVs, surface vehicles, and subsurface vessels operating in concert with one another to autonomously position and reposition themselves while a SEAL team conducts a direct action mission on a known objective. This is data from that 2017 experiment. And what we see is as the team traverses the island of San Clemente, their systems reposition themselves throughout, allowing them to have constant communication and ISR capabilities throughout the entirety of the exercise. The research has continued into the data from this experiment. More recently, these researchers have discovered that these autonomous systems over time can produce predictable paths. Those predictable paths can be used to triangulate where a supported ground force might be. Taking this data, researchers applied this model to a new scenario, a new mission conducted by a SEAL team doing direct action, supported by a series of autonomous systems. What they found was that they were able to predict where that team was going 24 minutes into the future. The dots you see on the screen, taking just those observable vehicles, they were able to predict 24 minutes into the future where the ground force was going to be. On average, 39 meters from their actual path. The red line, 75 meters. That's the farthest prediction ever. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an automated adversarial analysis. A tool that can be used, that can be implemented in our autonomous systems to provide an operator or a ground force commander the ability to look at how their systems are being employed and determine if they're being predictable and if they need to change how they're employing those systems. And this isn't a new or novel idea. As a Marine, this is something I was taught at the basic school. You go out, you build a static defense. You send out a team to go and look at how your defense looks from the enemy's perspective. So what I'm committed to, what I presented today, is that I'm committed to understanding how we can employ autonomous systems and how we can integrate them into a manned, unmanned team. And I ask you to join me. So when we talk about integrating autonomous systems into our forces, that we understand that they're working for us and not working for the enemy. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I look forward to your questions.
So I've had the chance to work on a lot of autonomous vehicle work, as well as a lot of the work looking at, for example, the systems working in Halo from OpenAI, building these autonomous agents, allowing them to learn to coordinate themselves. And one of the ways I'm thinking about the problem that you're posing is, just to be very wonky about it, is what kind of a cost function do we have for these vehicles to then coordinate in a way that maximizes information gain? I assume you don't want to sacrifice on that for the team, but also some metric of the information that gets exposed, or possibly even quite the opposite, leveraging the position of the vehicles to mask the position of the individual. So is there a clear sense of how you would quantify that problem so that you could actually build that into the training of the system, or are you currently thinking of this as a very top-down, we can program them in a discrete way?
So right now, man, what my research has looked at is providing a feedback loop, really to say, if we do this, if we employ our system in this manner, it's being predictable, or it's telegraphing our operational intent. Eventually, hopefully, that's something that can be included in how the system itself learns. But it's an overarching concept right now, looking at how we employ AI from the enemy's perspective or the adversary's perspective, and not just.
Larry, could you take that the next step, and as you employ these systems, use them to spoof the adversary so that you're someplace you're not in his mind? I mean, you would think that you could take that the next level of sophistication.
I believe so, sir. I don't see why not. My particular research has not gone in that particular area, but I don't see why that's not.
I mean, it's a mutual constraint problem. One is the information being transmitted undesirably, but it's right there, and the information being collected. Presumably, there's a number of configurations that get you similar amounts of information collected while minimizing the information shared. But I'm also wondering, it didn't come up in your presentation, but for a lot of these vehicles, there are also exploits. The adversary can go out and present visual cues and information that would cause the system to configure itself in certain ways. In fact, this has become a very effective ways for human players against AI systems in first-person shooters to play is figure out the exploit and then position their team in a way which induces the AI to respond in a highly stereotyped way. Then you know ahead of time what they're doing. So I know it's not part of your the current planning. I think it's really cool, the predictive capability here. But thinking in this multi-dimensional way of how do we mask the information about our current team, but also how do we protect ourselves against adversarial exploit? Adversary in this case being the technical AI term, as well as the adversary using adversaries. So is this something you've had a chance to look into?
So originally, the research was hoping to go into that area of figuring out that it is being predictable and then modifying its behavior.
No, trust me, I get it. Running out of time is the name of the game.
So Larry, along that line, would you then have the ability to take this work and then give it to another Marine student to carry on to the next stage?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's the idea. Additionally, I have created a somewhat working prototype of this that can operate on relatively small computers, specifically at home in my garage using a Raspberry Pi. But developing this so that it's actually something that can be implemented right now.
Now, when we heard, I had another VIP here, when we heard Nature's project, his comment on as we were heading out was, it could also be a way that you could proof the enemy in very effective ways. They could take the level. That would be another thing to have another Marine or another Navy student, another student, take that now to the next step. And that's the advantage of NPS, is that you can have students do a relay. You don't just stop at one place, you now take it to the next place. That's why these kinds of questions are really good.
And those are both areas of recommended contingency.
Maybe building on everyone on those comments. Let's say the Marine Corps has wisdom decided, hey, this officer's doing great work, let's give him some more time. Maybe everyone that said, you're welcome to say, what's the way ahead? What's the path to deployment going from big idea to actually getting something after this? You heard earlier just how challenging that is. What would you do if you had more time to work on this with the goal of actually deploying it?
A great question, sir. So the point of applying it to a microcomputer, something I could do in my garage, was to actually be able to implement this at the JIFIX this year, but I wasn't able to. So implementing this in a field test like the Joint Field Experiment Series conducted here at NPS, actually putting this type of system onto a real autonomous vehicle and see how it behaves and how it interacts and how accurate it is.
That's really kind of to Valerie's point, right? Is that career patterns don't have that kind of flexibility. And another year here at NPS, probably in terms of their future mobility and the normal career path, might not be viewed upon favorably.
So that's one of the things though that the Marine Corps Admiral has been trying to master is letting one student assume the work of a previous student over to McQuill or Troy 9 Palms. And so the Marine Corps actually has to actualize the relay in order to maintain the knowledge base and to grow it and then to apply it and deploy it. COVID did interrupt Larry's work because he had to give it, but someone else will.
I'll just give you 2 comments. First of all is, I think, so are teasing purposes of the market. Could be those. integrate that and start teasing out in the service lanes. The only other comment I have is parallel, you need to get some cyber mortars. Strap it on after. It has to be baked into the.
And that's one of the closing points. Look at these systems. This might be something that, as we acquire new AI systems, that we're talking about that as a requirement. We need to make sure that not only can it fly from point A to point B or control itself, we need it to not be predictable.
Okay, time for one more comment from Dr. Gannon.
Make a point with that video that seems very interesting. Computer science, we often try and find out limits of algorithms by hitting them with the same input over and over and over again. Eventually you make it cycle, repeats itself, and it reveals its weaknesses. It seems to be find that sort of principle in a new domain where you have what seems to be a complex algorithm, like the control of the drones, for example. There's an initial condition, which is where the land operator is stationed watching it. If you keep it launching missions from the same place, you're playing the same system with the same input, and eventually it's going to reveal weaknesses. That's very interesting. Worth further investigation at how you would possible to make these command systems work so that you can keep repeating an input and it doesn't beat the system. Can't figure out the weaknesses of the system by getting it to repeat itself. You have any thoughts on that?
Sir, I am not an expert on collaborative control. I'm an operations research student. So that, I think it's a great question, and that's something that's worth looking at. But that would be interesting to see how launching the system from a similar point, how it optimizes itself to do the same mission, just different.
And with that, transition to any questions from the virtual panel. General Brown.
Well, first of all, Larry, a great presentation. I loved how you used the squad systems operator. They didn't do anything wrong and faced the challenges, even threw Benedict Arnold in there. It was really clever. Well done. I'm for anything that helps a small unit. We need more at the small unit level. That's where the majority, I think it's 87% of the casualties occur. So the idea, I think, is brilliant of a red teaming of the autonomous systems, because we tend to think everybody thinks these autonomous systems are kind of unstoppable, be all end all. And to your work to show that they can pinpoint the location that accurately is very concerning. And so I see great utility in this and really appreciate you working it. I also could see some of the comments were broken out here. We were lagging behind a little bit, but I could see certainly use against opponents as well. To use it against them would have great value. But for our own internal, I think it's well done and a great presentation. I'd jump on it as a former infantry guy of 38 years. I can tell you, I'd want it. Thanks.
This is Jackson.
Hey, so can you hear me? Just comm check.
Good to go.
Okay. Hey, Larry, great job. Listen, you know Marines and I know Marines, and have you anticipated or thought about any reluctance in trusting the data that comes from the system? And if so, how would you overcome that reluctance with the personnel?
Good question, ma'am. I haven't really thought about how. So, having presented this, some of this information to other Marines, some of their first questions were, systems can do this. They can be this predictable. And so, whether it's trusting that the automated analysis is accurate or not, the fact that it's saying that their autonomous systems are telegraphing their intent was enough was enough for them to question the use of that particular system. I don't know if I answered your question.
Good to go. All right, and Ms. Raccone.
Thank you. I guess as a think tanker, I'm obligated to give a comment and a question. And my comment is, I guess the good news is that, in wartime, obviously this predictability is bad, but, maybe there are positive applications for it when we think about, seagoing vessels, navigating crowded waters and things to be able to, anticipate and do collision avoidance and things. In terms of my question, I guess, have you also thought about, I think with manned, unmanned teaming, it's interesting that you have the scouts element, but people also talk about the decoys element as well. If you've thought about ways of, layering, maybe more is more in this case, to, construct some kind of adversarial sample for the analytical tool.
Yes, ma'am. So that's actually one of the recommended continued works for my thesis, is continuing the current research to include modifications to flight paths, as well as inclusions of decoys or drones, or particularly agents that aren't following that particular optimization function in order to provide that deception.
Great.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Sure. Next up, we have Lieutenant Bridger Smith.
Thank
you for listening. I feel
We start tap dancing. My daughter is in tap dancing, so I might have to bring her up here, or at least start taking one.
Where you dance your pieces.
Go with the approval first.
Sorry. Far in.
Colonel Jackson.
I'm sorry, this is lagging quite a bit. Having some connection issues.
Your microphone's on, it's causing some noise.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I'm going to disconnect and reconnect. It's lagging quite a bit. Be right back. Please proceed.
Hello. Thank you for listening to what I feel is part of the SSB Enforces Next Big Technological League. My name is Lieutenant Bridger Smith, and I'm a submarine officer studying cyber systems and operations here at Naval Postgraduate School. Before reporting last March, I spent 2 years in Washington, honing my warfighting skills on board USS Nebraska Gold, SSB and 739. From this experience is where my innovation and big idea take its roots. So in true submariner fashion, let's dive into this story. In October of 2016, the chairman of the newly established Defense Innovation Board found himself in the Arab Gulf nation, Qatar. At the Air Operations Centers, Eric Schmidt saw up close the way that the U.S. Air Force was meeting the enormous challenges of fighting Islamic State forces. With all the sophisticated systems at their disposal, critical strategy decisions for aircrafts and tanker ops were being made with nothing more than Excel spreadsheets, colored plastic cards, and whiteboards. When Eric Schmidt asked one of the AOC commanders what his biggest concern was as he commanded in the War on Terror, he got an answer that surprised him. Frankly, I don't want them to erase my whiteboard. Now, this whiteboard, as Schmidt and his team soon found out, was the central piece to the 3-person, 9-hour daily task of trying to figure out all the ins and outs of aircraft and tanker refueling for the region. Enter Project Jigsaw and Kessel Run. In less than 6 months, airmen coders were able to deliver a software solution that saved hours every day and millions of dollars every single week. Project Jigsaw, costing grand total $2.2 million, paid for itself in under a week. So why is it important to focus on what the Air Force was doing in 2017, a world away, and how is it relevant to why we're here today?
Well, let's come back now from 2017 to right now. Big Idea Exchange 2021, and imagine. Imagine that you're the commanding officer on board one of only 14 multi-billion-dollar ballistic missile submarines. In the midst of rising power competition against China and Russia, you command a crew of 150 highly trained sailors across 14 divisions, all trying to coordinate their shipboard maintenance plan, as well as oversee tens of millions of dollars worth of shipyard coordinated repairs. This monumental task of getting your ship off the blocks and out to sea is happening, nothing more. A couple Excel spreadsheets, whiteboards. As a division officer, the only tool available to me to plan and execute my maintenance, Excel spreadsheets and whiteboards. Fortunately, the standard for getting the ship underway is late again. That's the report I'd have to discuss with the captain more times than any of us ever wanted to hear. Now, this isn't just a submarine problem. The Navy's lack of investment in program management software and work integration tools has resulted in almost innumerable maintenance delays and cost overruns fleet-wide. Several carrier strike groups have been extended or double pumped due to relief ship maintenance delays. With the capabilities and technologies on display with modern tools, another delayed report up the chain of command should not be the case. Set up our Navy teams for failure by not innovating our outdated tools. Now, enter my big idea. My big idea is to make the Kessel Run once more. But this time, I want to pair submariners with the software developers and give them the opportunity to bring maintenance planning and execution into the 21st century. To start, I partnered with Project Blue, a small group of innovators, pathfinders, and coders championing the digital transformation and design sustainable goals for team submarines. Our vision is to take cloud technology and the capabilities on display with 3D modeling and digital twins and actually build a submarine-specific maintenance planning and execution API. At the end of a 6-month pilot period, we would look to deliver an application suite called Submarine Core Services, built on the best tech stack that DevSecOps has to offer, and actually start addressing the readiness needs of submariners and software. By investing time in finding software solutions that enable ships to build integrated work schedules, leverage the capabilities of artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, and actually start incorporating the data that we're generating every single time we do one of these maintenance and availability cycles back into our decision-making process, we'll be contributing in the Navy-wide effort of getting our ships and submarines out to sea on time, on budget. Gone could be the days of editing a convoluted Excel spreadsheet and sitting through countless schedule update meetings. In its place would be empowered sailors and shipyard workers with the right tool, well aware of the task at hand and the maintenance plan for the coming months. This institutional technological change will be a giant leap forward for the submarine force. More importantly, it'll enable our submariners to start shifting their schedules to the left. I have no doubt the same dramatic effects in cost and efficiency that Kessel Run demonstrated possible can happen for the submarine force. Ships are not getting any younger. Maintenance, it's not going to get any easier. But believe me when I say this, because the flight rate is on. Sustainment never sleeps. So what I'm committed to, what I'm researching, is to find a way to get these new tools into the hands of our warfighters. I think with my big idea, your help along the way, it could be the first step in helping the SSBN force get back on order course. Thank you.
Here.
Happy to field any questions.
I would love to throw you a question.
Please.
So I'm going to make it really clear where I'm going up front, which is there's a missing side to your proposal here. I'm a nerd. I love the idea. Clearly, there's vast savings to be had here. They told you when my son was diagnosed with diabetes, they had us handwriting blood glucose numbers on a sheet of paper. And I said, you've got to be, well, you guessed what I said. So we hacked his device and we invented the first AI for diabetes. It was cool work. But I've also been the chief scientist of one of the first companies doing AI and hiring, which is really research. For 100 years, people have been researching hiring. A recruiter looks at your name, your school, and your last job. And if that doesn't match the pattern, they're out. Well, we had all this fancy AI. We would template a personalized letter to the individual. We'd identify the factors why your company ought to hire them. And we built all this stuff. We were on the cover of all sorts of magazines. It was blast. And then we did our first round of user analysis. People would open up the profile in our system that they paid thousands and thousands of dollars for a single license. And they look at your name, your school, and your last job, and then they cut and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet. So how are you going to deal with adoption? How are you actually going to transmit what is obviously a great idea into an actual practice? Because that, in my experience, is one of the hardest areas of innovation transformation, is creating a culture in which that cool new idea isn't just viewed as a pain in the ass that someone's forcing down my throat. So, have you thought about that?
Yes, and I like to think of the next generation of submariners who now have the opportunity to use an Xbox controller to spin on a photonics mask on an SSG. So there's already new capabilities that I'm used to that we're growing up with that are already being adopted there. And I think, you know, when I talk to submariners across the board, it was an innovation when Excel ended up being on the submarine force. And those are always fun conversations to have. But I think, you know, being a division officer, my friends being across the board, across the waterfronts being division officers, and when I have these conversations about, is this something you'd use? The response has been really great. And that's kind of the idea that Project Blue and Agile Centered Design does, is you ask the customer what they want, and you give them what they want, get it into production, and then build upon the initial successes that you have. I think that's what made Kessel Run successful. They didn't solve all of AFRICOM's tanker planning problems. They solved their whiteboard issue, and now all of AFRICOM's tanker planning operations are being done today.
You know, Richard, as an engineer on an SSBN 40 years ago, before we had Excel spreadsheets, but we had DRT paper and whiteboards. And that's precisely how we plan an upkeep, or an availability, a maintenance availability today. So I mean, it's kind of stunning to me that we're still essentially in the same place. And we, along the way, we built organizations like Para-SS. We're supposed to be able to house all this data from SSBN availability so that you built a more predictive capacity. So maybe you didn't pull that pump and find out that after 12 hours of maintenance on it, it probably could have lasted another 2 or 3 patrols before you did it. So I think, I mean, this is exactly where we need to be. But somehow it does need to be integrated into the larger piece, because it's not just your SSBN, right, of the 14 out there, or the Columbia class. I mean, you need to know precisely what the history is on every pump or system within the force, so that you can use AI and those predictive measures to cut down the maintenance, because we do a lot of maintenance we don't need to, right? And we miss maintenance that could have been could have anticipated the problem before you got on patrol. I mean, I think this is essential. It's stunning to me that it hasn't happened already. Of course, we've got more capability now to do that and be more predictive, and so it's wonderful we've got it here, but somehow we've got to get this back to the submarine forces folks so they can integrate it with their folks at NAVC to do something that we can deploy throughout the force.
So what's your plan to do with that?
So part one is to continue conversations in my thesis work with Project Blue, which is my sponsor. And then really just build a community. So we have to understand what the current systems are in play, whether that's data systems at the Tri-Nuclear facilities in Bangor and Kings Bay, the shipyards are using, and then talk to those stakeholders, continue talking with those stakeholders, to show them that the capability exists, or that we rapidly prototype this based off of my experiences, based off feedback we received from the tech, but let them know it's a possibility and we're willing to work with it.
I think this is an opportunity for NWSI and us to talk to them. With your insights.
Well, you might start with the sub-pack N4, you know, or
Correct.
the submarine forces N4 organization, because I mean, they've got, you know, they're closer to the problem. And then if, you know, if you could start at a place, if you could prototype it, for example, in the Pacific Northwest, in Bangor and the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, you know, so that you can have a real opportunity to see the value of it and do it there first, then you can expand it, I think, force-wide, but something along those lines. I'm just afraid if you go straight to NAVC,
Oh, yeah.
you'll get very,
It'll be way over as you.
it'd be great to get the sub-pack N4 out here. That you need, or send Bridger to Hawaii, yeah. That might be
Sounds good.
That might be his preference to, you know, to just give him a brief, and, because it makes lots of sense.
Yes, sir.
And is Jerry Ellis seen this?
Actually, he was one of the people who projected me towards NDIA to do the presentation and help me with active conversation.
Great work. I want to just double down on what you mentioned, you're talking stakeholders. You know, I teach a class at Stanford called Hacking for the Defense. We actually have a team right now, we're teaching this course that's looking at a very similar problem. But for example, the solution that this team, the first MVP, is very different than it is now, you know, beneficiary discovery. So I would just really encourage you to take your MVP, if you will, and keep getting feedback from the first group of stakeholders, beneficiaries, in multiple levels. And also, it's about deployment, not demo. So it's not only getting
100%.
the right solution informed by rigorous beneficiary discovery, but how do you get it deployed? And you're going to find that, if you're the term saboteurs, so there's people that have a vested interest in not seeing this solution, this thing solved. The status quo is what they want to continue. You can imagine those types of things. Really, I would encourage you, it's a great start. Take the MVP out. You can't get enough feedback. Really think about how you're going to deploy it, not just it.
We're really looking for the opportunity to get it in front of the users at the basis and get their feedback, because it's invaluable. And
You know so much, you want to jump to solution, but you might be surprised on what that real solution may look like. Great work.
I feel obligated. So first of all, absolutely awesome. Observations are captain or lieutenant. Status quo wasn't acceptable. Threat requires we do this. Not just a good idea. This is not just a program. Threat requires we get vulnerability. Three is, I don't know if the Navy has a Kessel Run equivalency. That's the wave of the future. I'll see if we can do some partnership with the Air Force. Last thing, it became a reality because you had an operational commander sponsor here. I'll talk to Rich about Navy operation.
Yes, sir. We're trying to stand up Project Blue, but we've designed the different iterations of the digital twin and the job planning software with Platform One. Thank you.
We can talk.
Okay.
Talking in a slightly different dimension here. For everybody here, Bridger and I first met on Zoom last fall quarter. He came to our course with Todd Lyons where we talked about leadership practices for bringing idea into adoption. And Bridger was a pretty timid guy at that time. He wasn't sure what he wanted to work on. Started picking on this thing that he was seeing going on around him in the submarine community. You have absolutely amazed me at how far you've come. 9 months, taking that, building a community already behind you, becoming a voice for change. The fact you did it in 9 months is absolutely amazing. This is the kind of thing our students can do. I'm really proud of what you've been able to do in such a short time. We can do this for many more students, and that's the things that this program is all about. Help students do what you've done.
Thanks, Ryan. It's nice to meet you in person. Dr. Orskine, last one.
Yeah, I was just curious. It seems like there's such a great success story on the Air Force side. What do you see? More importantly, I also come from when I showed up in 2010 looking for registration. So I get the status quo, but I'm curious if you think
CNO might be listening.
There are, the innovation ecosystem within the DoD is very much alive. There are a lot of different barriers, stakeholders that don't necessarily want to change. So one, you have to have the courage to get out there and challenge the status quo. Sometimes that ends up reaching into somebody's pocketbook and people don't like that sort of thing. But the biggest thing is just being able to build a community to drive those changes. I don't think you'll get anybody. I talk to people across the board. There's processes that can be taken from manual to automatic. People think that it's a great idea. Figuring out every single stakeholder that can get you there, bringing NAVSEA to the table, bringing STRATCOM to the table, so that the entire boat and all those operational commanders know what's going on, have a single conversation or a continued conversation. We're not trying to make any enemies. We're not trying to point the finger at Ohio about why things are so messed up right now. We're trying to work towards a common, better collective future. That ultimately could affect Columbia when it comes to.
I think there could be some
Yeah, submarines go out to sea and unplug from the world. So trying to prove that a connected system using cloud technologies work usually there's a lot of counter arguments. Not an easy technical problem to solve, but the DoD with DevSecOps and cloud technology and the new pushes, the environment's right to drive this forward and have those type of conversations. Find the innovators like the ones that Project doing.
I have to address some of this because for the last 20 years, I've run a program here at the postgraduate school called Military Applications for Optimization, which addresses in the AI stack the decision aspect of AI. That is, if you have the data, if you've done all those steps, then what's the best recommendation way? You showed that. One of the problems we have is simple. MCI would not accept this program at all. So what we've done is taken some of our programs, actually with the commercial software, modified them with huge VBA decision aids so the Navy would adopt them. That's how we got the refueling and sea planner out for the various logistic capabilities, which essentially does the same thing for scheduling logistics as it does their strike task force capability. So the adoption aspect is sometimes bureaucratic, which goes back to my original concept. That is, we have to get out of our own way at times, adopt these ideas that be able to find a way. Now, what the other aspect, I think, your solution here is probably computing at the edge. That is not the cloud-based solution. Put that cloud on your SSBN and on chips in order to run these programs independent of our current MCI.
Yes, sir. And actually, that's what my thesis work is trying to figure out what the infrastructure as code, the configuration as code looks like to actually create a DevSecOps pipeline for submarines, a capability that we're working towards today, but doesn't currently exist. It's a great problem to solve, and I'm very passionate about it and happy to have the opportunity.
With that, I'd like to transition to the virtual panel. General Brown.
Hey, Bridger, first of all, another great presentation, and I applaud that you looked at the Air Force. That's the type of joint integration we need among the services. And the other thing, I agree with all the comments, but you know, it makes perfect sense what you're proposing, but change is often hard. Somebody will lose a job because of this innovation. Bureaucracies are designed to say no. So the plan of how you get this implemented is absolutely key. And could you go even farther, a little more on the predictable maintenance? As I think it was Admiral Fargo mentioned, That's working in a lot of services. I know there's predictable maintenance now, for example, a tank engine, M1 tank engines are over $1 million, and we used to change them periodically. We went to predictable maintenance and just saved a ton of money, and in many other areas. So could you go even farther in that, and farther than just the 14 submarines in the class you were talking about? Great proposal. How do you get it out there successfully? Don't assume it's going to happen, because change is very hard, even though it's a tremendous idea. Thanks.
With that, we do have Director Jackson back, but I believe she missed the opportunity to hear it. So we're going to cut over to Ms. Rekonen. Director Jackson, if you want to pipe in, just give me a wave.
Thanks for an excellent presentation. It's not often I come away with a proposal for building a new technology and having a profound sense of optimism. I think it was really elegant to identify a process that actually worked. One of the perhaps 2 rare success stories in the military, and then figure out a way to transpose that onto another problem set. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. With that, that is it for 10th further session.
Josh could be the champion, right? Since he's the Marine Forces. He understands the problem, and my experience, if you've got a 4-star champion that is gonna run with this, then you can knock down all those hurdles.
Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Tim Bettis.
Thank you. That's specifically. Great power competition. That's the big buzzword these days, bouncing around national security. Conflict versus competition. What does this mean for the Department of Defense? In chess, we know conflict is after the move of the first piece. The objective, force the capitulation of the adversary by killing or capturing their forces fastest. In war, you know that your maneuver elements are not rooks or pawns. They're destroyers, soldiers, aircraft carriers, cruise missiles. However, there are 3 elements at play here, 3 factors we overlook in a conflict. They also happen to be the prices that we fight over in a conflict. Forces and the displacement, their disposition on the board, the rules dictating how they maneuver through the spaces, and the ultimate size of the board. Competition occurs before the move of the first piece. That's the stage for conflict. Effective competition can actually make conflict easier as well. Why not manipulate the board well enough that at the outset of conflict, your forces are positioned in an advantageous position and your adversaries are not? You can also win without fighting. Why not manipulate the board so well that you render the idea of conflict meaningless to your adversary? How do you win without fighting exactly? Secure your ability to field and maneuver forces, deny your adversary the ability to do the same. Build and strengthen your partnerships and alliances, divide your adversary from their allies. Sun Tzu calls this the second highest level of warfare. It also happens to be China's strategy towards us. In conflict, your key warfighting functions are fires, maneuver, sustainment. Competition, our key functions are diplomacy, development, covert action, and regular warfare. Who else secures basing agreements or access rights, or formalizes security partnerships between us and our allies? Our diplomats. Follows then that in competition among great powers, DoD's maneuver element is not the Marine Expeditionary Unit or the Air Expeditionary Wing. Our contact layer is foreign area officers and America's Special Operations Forces. The problem I'm addressing today is that the DoD has yet to articulate a modern operating concept that recognizes the central role that foreign area officers play in this new mode of warfare, let alone one that integrates us alongside our special operations counterparts in a unified pursuit of our military and national interests. This lack of focus leaves today's FAOs ill-equipped for this current fight. This is today's chessboard. Once a formidable structure capable of adding unity of focus to our regional commands, capable of marshaling an enormous amount of forces and resources to be able to meet regional crises as they pop up. This is a system designed for a post-Cold War world, a world where conflict was regional. By regional, I mean that aside from global thermonuclear war, conflicts tended to start and stop in the same pocket of the world. Think Operation Desert Storm, Operation Allied Force in the former Yugoslavia. Even the global war on terror was fought by us in a largely regional format. However, due to advancing technology, increasing global interconnectivity, the cost of entry to the global power projection game has dropped. America's toughest adversaries, those who challenge our seat at the table, had no reason then to respect these artificial boundaries that we established, and they have the means now to leapfrog them, wreaking bureaucratic havoc inside our slow-to-adapt organizations. The constraints that these boundaries now have on our operations and our organizational cognition are numerous. Bottom line, great powers are transregional. Our approach to them is not. Effectively, this means the diplomatic half of our maneuver element is ill-equipped to be able to compete in this fight. My big idea is to modernize the way we train and equip foreign area officers for the era of great power competition. I want to do this along two lines of effort. First, we must establish a standardized series of developmental milestones for our entire FAO Corps that prioritizes regional specialization early in a FAO's career, and then broadens these diplomats out to be trans-regional competitors as they reach more senior ranks. Executing this mid-career pivot will be the key challenge for us in the coming decade. It can be done first and foremost by establishing an advanced level of professional military education for our foreign area officer corps, for those who've successfully completed 2 or more regional assignments. Right now, no advanced training program exists at all for this force. NPS already has here a great power curriculum that we've established. It complements the regional curricula of this pipeline. Great place for us to start. Build on it. Second, we must employ these military diplomats in ways that are designed to achieve integrated and complementary effects with our special operations counterparts. Such an effort can help us meet our mission to impose costs and create dilemmas for our adversaries along the entire spectrum of competition and conflict. You can achieve this with 3 changes. First, we must routinize cross-combatant command assignments for our senior FAOs. Such a move can help share strategic wisdom between commands and mitigate the strategic confirmation bias that emerges in FAOs who've only ever operated in one corner of the metaphorical chessboard. Next, we should increase FAO presence at our theater special operations commands. Third, and most importantly, we must establish a joint staff element led by a senior FAO designed to review America's campaign plans, policies, and strategies from the adversary's perspective. We already have a proof of concept. A senior leader that I would point to as a pinnacle example of what a trans-regional competitor looks like. Lieutenant General Charles Hooper. General Hooper served at the peak of his career as a defense attaché to the People's Republic of China. Later went on to serve as a defense attaché, senior defense official, and the chief of the Office of Military Cooperation for our partners in Egypt. After that, he went on to lead the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, Department of Defense's premier institution tasked with building and strengthening partnerships with our allies abroad. I can think of no better way internal to our organizations to outmaneuver Beijing's overtures to our potential partners and allies than by exchanging leaders like him between CENTCOM and Indo-PACOM. His career path was a fluke, which is a problem. Disparate, or a convergence of the disparate needs of the Department of Defense, overlapping with the career timing and performance of a stellar officer. I'm advocating today that we systematize General Hooper's career path as the gold standard approach for how we employ senior leaders in the future. Leaders capable of meeting the White House's charge to revitalize America's unmatched network of alliances and partnerships abroad. Now, this is the point where I have to stop and caveat that we don't yet have an approved national security strategy in which to ground our next move. We do have interim guidance, like the Jake Sullivan quote I opened with here. Much of what I pulled from is actually grounded in the statements, op-eds, or publications published by the Biden administration's current. Shortly after the publication of a formal strategy, some people in this room may be asked to provide draft inputs to a national defense strategy. And after that, to a national military strategy. In fact, the timing to make forward progress on this issue could not be any better. Today marks our opening gambit. However, the window is fleeting. And America's success over the coming decade will be determined by how well we're able to shape the chessboard that we're operating on, or how well it's shaped against us. If this idea holds water, then I ask you to help me carry it forward. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to contribute to this conversation. My name is Captain Tim Bettis, and I'm a Foreign Area Officer Fellow here at the Naval Postgraduate School. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
I think you're right. This interim national security guidance, we're going to see more continuity in aspects of the last time. Not going to remain relevant. Also, I actually, have you been in touch with General Hooper?
I reached out to him on LinkedIn.
I'm on a call on Monday. I'm going to tell him, you got to talk to this guy. So I work closely with him. But he is amazing, great role model. You're right. It happened in spite of the system, not because of it. And that needs to change. I think you're onto some great things here. I was a foreign area officer, special forces officer, way back in the day when you could do both. You were a dual track, and I lost a lot by forcing me. I do think, and for all the, even the previous presentation, there's going to be some blockers there. There's going to be people across the interagency, like the State Department. Hey, this is our foreign area officers or diplomats alike, and we're the pros. I mean, just think about all that. After deployment, think of what it might take to build those coalitions and support and press the potential corruption. But great. For me personally, I think it's great. You know, I have background in this.
And I, being the master of the obvious, threats that we face. Not sure. Department of Defense. Find out where the antibodies are. DOD perspective. Crossbow. The only one that really honors our attribute.
Or if I could just say, foreign area officer for 20 years, and one of the things that I would highlight is when we send our foreign area officers out, they typically go to the regional commands to do in-calls. They never go to STRATCOM and visit and find out what the strategic priorities are for our nation. And I think that's a way to begin just that simple thing, turning the dial and having that established as a practice. And I will tell you, State Department will be on board with this because they do this as a matter of practice already. They literally implement this. So I think you've got a great idea, and I think there's ways that we can begin to, show the value of it, even with the current system as it's set up.
Tim, in 2020, I had the privilege of being on a working group with the Department of State as they reimagine what it means to be ambassador or for them. They're going to places of their own. They are not able to recruit adequately, and they have really taken a look at what does it mean to be an American U.S. diplomat, a U.S. Foreign Service officer, and they want to change the term Foreign Service officer to United States Diplomatic Corps officer. That's not like a foreign thing, it's about us. So my point to you is that there is an appetite out there about us and alliances overall. So trying to do this within the FAO world is pretty good. I think the timing is right because the diplomatic corps are looking at the same thing for themselves. So it might be good to I've got a copy of that report, happy to give it to you. And interestingly, they are most concerned about their diversity. So this is a really good time now to be talking about this. So as you get in with the good Cooper, who's fabulous, I'll give you that report. And I think that this is a good thing, General, to talk about out of STRATCOM. What is STRATCOM? That will be the first question that will occur.
I'm more of a process question because each of the services approach FAO is different. Well, this isn't necessarily an Air Force because I think the Air Force does a better job here than the Navy. Is your concept implementable within a standard 30-year career regardless of what uniform you wear, or should we look for the ability to extend that career beyond 30 if general or flag officer is not?
That's absolutely one of the major impediments is I'm reaching the FAO career track as early as feasible in my 7 to 10 year window, which means hitting retirement at 20. If I stay that long, means I'm already out. So the idea of developing, a junior diplomat in the military is really a mid-career, just under mid-career professional. So, I mean, to answer the first question about standardization, I mean, the DODI instruction that governs this was published in 2007. So even before Secretary Clinton published her piece in Foreign Policy magazine on the pivot towards Asia. So I'm not sure if that needs necessarily been grounded in this philosophy. So that would be something that would have to be looked at to be able to reach standardization across the force. Even, and that's one of the other impediments I know is going to be department requirements. What the Navy wants their FAOs, what the Marine wants their RAOs to do. The Air Force just finally standardized to a single core track FAOs, because we were also doing the dual, I'm an intelligence officer and a FAO at the same time, going back and forth, jack of all trades. So in terms of career length, I know that's a challenge. I don't know what the answer is right now, but I know standardization.
So clearly I'm a bit of an outsider knowing the details of all of this here, but what it feels like to me is my experience. So I did my PhD under what's called an IGERT, Integrated Graduate Research. So it's basically, it pays for students to do integrated research. So in my case, brains and machines. And it's great. I got to be the student rep for CMU at a big thing in Washington. And the director of NSF came out and gave this big stirring speech. And then one of the students said, "This is wonderful that you funded all this stuff, but no departments will hire us because we're not specialists in one field. What are you going to do to support that?" And she very honestly said, "We were just hoping you'd be so amazing they'd have to hire you anyway." And this comes up again and again. Just my last year at Cal, we had a jointly funded engineering and physics role, and the physics department shot down every candidate because they want a pure physicist. But it was a joint role. I mean, it was designed that way. I heard you kind of evoke early on that there are some career issues here, and it seemed to be an undercurrent of some comments. I mean, one thing is putting in place a plan for this, but another thing is for people to look at their career and think, am I an experiment? Is this really going to play out? I mean, clearly, I don't know anything about this space, but
that's absolutely a problem. And I already think inside the FAO world, there is a huge desire for folks to expand beyond these artificial boundaries. For example, being an Arabic speaker and learning French and going to North Africa. Well, the Army considers their Middle East officers can go to Tunisia. The Air Force uses a different series of artificial boundaries. We go as far west as Egypt, but I can go to Russian-speaking Pakistan. So I think there's energy and intellectual curiosity in the force to be able to broaden themselves out, but not necessarily the career path that recognizes or embraces that per se. But I mean, that fundamentally is a challenge. Another thing in the FAO Corps is we both have an artificial cap on the number of general officers we're allowed to have in the Department of Defense, and they're cutting back some of the billets at foreign embassies that are held by general officers. Except in the FAO world, when you're meeting with the your equivalent in the Saudi National Guard, it sends one message to meet with the lieutenant colonel and another to meet with the general officer. So there's an important role in promoting FAOs to senior ranks, but the internal difficulty is you're a specialist your entire career, so we want you to be a generalist as a general officer, and there's no transition point in between. And I think that's part of the I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I think it's probably as good an answer as someone can give right at the moment.
With that, just one more question from the in-person panel.
I have a quick comment. I know I've already used my, just give you a great Joe Phelp quote. You might want to look into your pitch. Just passed a few months ago. Great American. He would often tell the story that he would always meet with the new incoming outgoing ambassadors before they went out to station. He'd have a big globe. Say, all right, come over here and point out your country. Or no, it's the United States or America. And so back to the point about going to strategic command, it's great vignette if you want to work in. I've double dip on this one.
With that, we'll transition over to the virtual panel. General Brown.
Hey, Tim, great job. Excellent presentation. I hate to say anything even remotely negative, but the fact you highlighted a great friend of mine, Lieutenant General Charles Hooper. Hoops and I go back 40 years to West Point, and I agree with you. He's a tremendous example of a fail and where we got it right. And as Dr. Felter said, he would know well, it was by accident, not on purpose, those assignments. But just a couple things. You said, in competition, FAOs and special forces are represent us out there, and they do. I agree with you, but I would submit they're not enough. We need forward station conventional forces as well are critical, but they are out there. FAOs and SF are out there all over. You're right in that. I found it interesting you used chess as the guide, based it on chess, when really the Chinese are playing Go, the abstract strategy game, surround more territory. So it's almost like you're trying to take chess and turn it into Go in this case. And I agree with I like the trans-regional approach. The only big question is, how do you get the expertise needed in these complex areas? Immersion has proven we have fellowships that immerse folks in schools for several years in nations. They stay in that region for a while. They create these relationships. And I found those to be extremely helpful, particularly obviously in crisis situations. They'd know who to talk to. They'd have tremendous advice because of that expertise. How do you keep that expertise if it's all trans-regional?
So there's internally, I've debated a few different approaches for what trans-regional education could look like. And I'm reticent to say that the idea of senior PME should be another year at NPS. NPS can certainly have a leading role in that, but the idea of going to Monterey to learn about the Middle East when you're a senior diplomat, or to learn about another region, I think in-region fellowships are a great idea. Or as COVID has kind of proven, we don't necessarily need a structured classroom to be able to learn, so long as we're providing resources or enabling people to be able to kind of extend that intellectual curiosity elsewhere. In terms of, I'm not sure if this answered your question, so get me back on track if I slip off the rails a little bit. But I'm talking with the senior mentor about two different ways we could approach trans-regional leaders as senior officers. And one is just to, once you reach the rank of colonel, eliminate a regional specialization requirement at all and just send officers wherever they can go, which is kind of, in my opinion, like a rat shot, haphazard way of, if you're not going to build generality, or sorry, you're not going to build fluency through anarchy in a structure like that. But if you complement someone like, say, myself as a SECCOM FAO fellow and send me to a specialization in Southeast Asia, where the Muslim population, Indonesia as our largest, is the most populous Muslim country in the world, certainly has ties back to Saudi Arabia, and that linkage is going to potentially be important both for the growth of the Gulf, the emergence of Southeast Asia, and then potentially is a means of influence or zone of competition amongst not just China, because narrow focus on China has other implications I won't go into right now, but our Japanese partners, our partners in India, et cetera. So I think it's hard to build fluency without a little bit of focus. I think that would be a way for to have a credible Middle East expert focus on their region's linkages with another piece of the world and kind of be able to build those ties as like a stepping stone, if that makes sense.
Next up, Director Jackson.
Okay, happy to introduce a little bit of friction to the event. Sorry about that, technical glitches. You started, Tim, this, again, great presentation, and you started to answer it to the general's question just a minute ago, but I was curious about the advanced PME portion. You know, how do you envision that curricula? You know, what do you think are going to be sort of key facets of that program? And then, you know, is that something that can be achieved? You know, you call it PME. Is it solely a military school that delivers that? Thanks.
I don't think it has to be a military school that delivers that, and I think there's a lot of value you can find in civilian institutions, either abroad or here. But no, I recognize there's going to be some friction from the services, for example, because FAOs are such a small population of our force. They're a highly trained, specialized population of our force, and the idea of taking them out of rotation for 6 months to a year, I know it's going to cause a lot of heartburn in the Pentagon. So I don't, just all that to say, I don't necessarily see, you know, an advanced level of training for FAOs being another year, you know, a PCS plus another year in Monterey plus a PCS elsewhere, as much as it is. You know, coming from the intelligence world, we have different steps of training for our officers, you know, ranging from 1 month, 200 level to 6 months, you know, the higher level, et cetera, et cetera. But that's instituting developmental milestones along, you know, whatever your strategic objective is when you're trying to develop and train. So I'm not sure if that nebulous answer answers your question. But I'll pause.
And then Ms. Rakonen.
Thanks for your presentation. My previous job was actually in security cooperation, so this was pretty near and dear to my heart. I think you rightfully pointed out that China issues, global, you know, power, competition, however you want to call it, issues are global issues, and we have this kind of artificial seam problem. But I was wondering if you had also considered, maybe in addition to looking at it as regionally plus trans-regionally, also introducing maybe functional specialties. For instance, you know, everyone knows how to do CT evidently, but then you have this emerging, you know, technology competition issue. 5G rollouts in certain countries, for instance, can impact spectrum availability. If you've considered having regional specialists and then having functional specialists and then, you know, pairing them together as you see fit.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the benefits of what the way the FAO core is shaped right now is you start out in your primary career field and maybe you're a cyber operations officer and then you transition into being a FAO. So I think there is organic knowledge that the DoD has that it can then, you know, if you're you know, cyberspace and you're focusing on East Asia, then maybe we'll send you to U.S. Forces Japan and then or the embassy out there, and then you can kind of work a partnership liaison piece. What I don't know right now, and it's something I have to go look at, is how our boards select or field or recruit candidates from particular career fields, pull them into the FAO career field to then set them on a track to go build partnerships, specifically like in the Technology Alliance realm. I know is a huge one. But I'm not sure if we do that. I hope we do, but I'm also pessimistic.
Based on all the continuity with the Department of State, that education in places like Johns Hopkins, SICE, Fletcher School of Law, Diplomacy, Georgetown, those all make great sense for FAO. So I do think on the career pattern piece, you really have to get to the point where you can keep a lot of the colonels around longer. So because if you're running out of runway here, but you're not running out of utility. And we're very limited, right? I think the Navy used to have, we had 4 defense attachés for flag officers. They move around depending on what's going on. I don't know what the Air Force program looks like. The Army was clearly, from a combatant commander standpoint, at the gold standard for FAO. So I mean, they had more of them. They deployed them well. They were very valuable to the combatant commander as you moved around the region. But somehow you got to recognize it's almost like the Navy when they were looking for key pilots, longer without an opportunity. There's going to be limited opportunity for some of those folks to make flag. But their utility is so high and they're so valuable, you got to find a way to keep them around the 30 years.
With that, Tim, if you could get with Matt, just for the live stream audience, you're able to post questions. We'll be able to have the presenter answer them via the chat function. And then for the panelists, I was just asked by the virtual panel members, and I did not tell you, but the microphones are located up, so if you're speaking, please speak up and out, if possible. And with that, one other thing before I introduce Captain Gannon, we are busting our time hacks pretty good. I'm not here to hold you hostage. We do have food and beverage, and so during the question and answer, if you need to use the bathroom or grab some snacks or something like that, please do. It's my aim to not take an actual physical break and just power through this as some mentors have told me that I could say that to retired force fires and then see how that goes afterwards. So with that, Captain Michael Gannon is our next presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a third generation Marine, and I'm incredibly proud of that. In 1942, when my grandfather enlisted, he was taught likely in a classroom very much like this, with the students, audience on one side, and the instructor on the other, teaching through a lecture, and then likely using a black and white video. In 1969, my father enlisted, likely in a classroom very much like this, except now with a Kodak carousel and clicking through slides. Then in 2007, I enlisted, and I am being taught the exact same way as my father before me and his father before him, except this time with PowerPoint. And then again, a decade later in 2016, I find myself at the basic officer course going through PowerPoints. Needless to say, the DoD has not changed or modernized its basic premise of education and teaching modalities in nearly 70 years. We are stuck in the industrial era model of education, instruction, and the training of our armed forces. Now, in general, the life cycle of learning can be described in 5 steps or phases. And currently, the DoD can guarantee that it will always accomplish 2 of them. I can guarantee that we will teach, and we will test you on what we teach. And when able, we'll practice. Ideally, and this causes a problem actually, this forces instructors to teach to the test, which guarantees that a student will graduate the schoolhouse because they must continue through the accession pipeline. That's quantity, not quality. Now, ideally, a course should be designed with a student's learning through all 5 phases of learning in mind. And that begins with instructional models that engage the students throughout the period. Then practical application that reinforces the lessons and utilizes a building block approach and methodology to enforce the concepts and applications. That means the student's examination would be a practical application or a scenario where the comprehension and proper techniques and application of that be tested. Now, this type of instruction would be preparing Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen for the job that they will have, not an arbitrary test. Competency, not rote memorization of techniques. Now, this next example that's already up is from my personal experience as an enlisted Marine and as an officer. What you see before you is the quick reference guide for how to load ComSec, frequency hopping channels, and how to send a line of sight transmission. Practical examination for this is to read off a sheet of paper, press the correct buttons, select the correct knobs in the right order, you've passed. That is the epitome of teaching to a test and not comprehension or understanding. In an era of advanced technology, it's absolutely absurd that we're stuck teaching in the industrial model and preparing our young men and women to fight and win today's battles in an era of information warfare. And do better. We should do better, and we will do better. We already are. We are doing better training pilots. Because of the exorbitant cost of aviation and flying, the aviation community across the DoD leverages simulators in every possible methodology imaginable. They integrate it in every capacity that they can think of with rapid experimentation. This is a photo from MIT's group learning that they're trying to facilitate with the NATO, joint NATO flying program. All I am suggesting is that we do the exact same thing for the individual and the collective skills that are taught at our DoD schoolhouses and educational institutions. My big idea is that we close that gap for our current educational modalities. The method we do that is through the amelioration of the existing learning management systems, commercially available off-the-shelf technology, existing equipment, and open source software. DoD can print, manufacture its own training simulators, and then leverage computer-aided instruction to close the gap from the initial lecture and the final cumulative skills test. Lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. So, simulators in this way will be the mechanism in which we ensure students' engagement of the material, opportunities to practice, will increase understanding and performance, competency and learning outcomes will increase. So what would the future of education look like if the DoD was to implement these modalities and increase technology in its educational institutions and their training command? I have a pretty good idea of that, and I'd like to share my vision of what that future could be. 2022, and a Marine checks into the basic radio operator's course. Marine is issued a training simulator along with every other Marine. Then in class, he interacts with that simulator as the teacher instructs, answers questions, and guides through the period of instruction. Then the student takes the training simulator back to his barracks room, or her barracks room, and then prepares for tomorrow's lessons by going through videos, reading about the next day's evaluation and practical exercises so they understand it, take basic comprehensive quizzes, and identify what they're struggling with. And then most importantly, they practice. They practice on the actual equipment that they are going to train with. Then the next day, when they come into class, the instructor stands in front of them, just like this, and reads off a 5-paragraph order for combat patrol that's about to step out. They're given the comm plan, SOP, and everything that they're required to have in order to set up the communication radio suite for those Marines. In the next 90 minutes, that radio operator sets up the communication suite, and then time stops, initial comm checks, pre-combat inspections, and they are evaluated on their ability to prepare the Marines' equipment for combat patrol. They're training to the job that they will have, not to an arbitrary test. Training to standards of combat, what we do. It doesn't stop there. When the student graduates, well, actually before the student graduates, schoolhouse, so the simulator leverages that data, collects it the entire time passively. And then through the collection of that data, we use it with working with the monitors to best partner or best match Marines to operational units. And that's talent management at the very beginning of a Marine's career. But you cannot manage what you do not measure. So it has to start in the educational pipeline, the session pipeline. Right? This is in support of the Commandant's Plan and Guidance to leverage data and talent management, and then the most recent updated guidance on creating the data advantage within the DoD, which came out last week. So the student graduates are now in garrison. They now find themselves using very familiar equipment to train and instruct administrative and logistics Marines in the admin and logistics cell of the battalion's Combat Operations Center. Then, when the battalion deploys, they find themselves operating as part of a joint operation forces, carrying equipment that the Marine Corps doesn't have. Marine thinks to himself, okay, this isn't a problem. Goes over to the Hybrid Logistics Center, has a radio set printed out, the model, gets all the components, rapidly assembles it, and then finds himself training on that very equipment he needs. He downloads it all from the DoD's joint learning environment with the most up-to-date courseware directly from the schoolhouse. He can begin to train on equipment that does not belong to his service. Now this story, this example, if you will, is not what should be or not what could be, it's what should be. Over the past 8 weeks, I've been working on a proof of concept. I've been working to create the Marine Corps' man-portable radio set, specifically a 117 Golf. Normally a $17,000 radio, but through leveraging 3D printers, commercial off-the-shelf technology, open source software, I've created a prototype. I did this for $250. YouTube, lots of YouTube. 3D printers at the Robo Dojo, and a lot of assistance. Raspberry Pi, a touchscreen, and some self-taught Python and Visual Basic. Apologize. The technology is already here. We already can do it. All that's left is to further develop the software, adopt the technology, grow it, and then sustain this capability throughout the DoD. Beginning to work with the Marine Corps Communications and Electronics School in their efforts to modernize their teaching modalities and implementation of technology and methods. But that's only one school. There are at least a dozen, if not 100, schools across the DoD that this concept applies to. I need your help and advocacy in order to branch out and get this information to the rest of the services. In this future, no matter what, airmen, sailors, soldiers, Marines can train under any circumstances and sets of situation. No longer will equipment readiness issues or shortfalls in equipment and availability cause a degradation in training. And a degradation of training means loss in proficiency and lethality. Efficiency. So in closing, no matter what, no longer should a service member deploy undertrained. God willing, but no man's ghost say that they lost their life for a want of training.
So how do we come up with an education system that produces people like you that go out and figure out how to build that thing? Just because they needed to for presentation. And that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, man. We have the smartest armed forces the world has ever seen. And we tie everyone's hand behind their back. Through institutional inertia, through bureaucracy, through laws, through regulations, name it. Unleash the potential. Unleash the potential of Marines. Unleash the potential of soldiers, sailors, airmen. Incentivize it. The innovation challenges that we're already leveraging across the DoD Innovation Center, those are great starts, but they need to be further incentivized. It goes to talent management. If somebody has a really good idea, maybe it's time to pluck them out of that unit, drop them into a place where they can do that idea, regardless of their occupation and regardless of where they are. Maybe instead of concerning about their career path and their key building grade or their key assignment tour or operational tour, we should let them take an idea through its fruition and see where it can go. And that means occasionally pursuing a bad idea. ARPA has pursued some bad ideas that have led to amazing things. That doesn't mean fiscal irresponsibility, but pursue ideas. Hope that answers that now.
I got 1,000 questions, but that's a great start.
Well,
We can open it up. I'm talking enough, trust me.
We've got a podcast this afternoon.
Yeah, oh, great.
Yeah.
Michael, you are going to turn us over to the Marine Corps Radio Electronic Training Command?
Marine Corps Communication and Electronics.
Yeah, thank you very much. So then, so you have somebody who are doing that. You have a direct contact.
Yes, leveraging the Senior Marine Office and working with MOVES already. We've had that initial meeting. We're actually trying to figure out and formalize that relationship as we speak. To ensure that we go about it and meet their intention and guidelines and hopefully pull more students in. So as a GDSM student, I'll probably focus on the manpower implementation and impacts of this, and then hopefully somebody from computer science can kick off where I very much have left off.
Okay, so then, one more thing. So then you've got some folks who are going to be working on the training protocol to make that all come together, right?
Yes, we've already spoken with their academics and the two program leads that they have there now. Hopefully we'll hear something back from this initial, had a few meetings, lots of emails, and moving the ball forward. They want to implement this by 2022.
Good. Makes sense. Of course, we'll normally move up there, then we'll go out, put it out on RFP, and it'll come back with the cost for a training session will be more than the radio.
Well, I mean, the reality is something like this needs to be student-centered, active learning. I mean, people have looked hard at this kind of computer-mediated education work. My wife, for example, and it's a different way of educating people, and it's harder. The instructors need to get training in how to do this sort of stuff.
Yes, it very much would require a rethinking of how we do instruction because the modalities and the technology is changing the industrial approach. No longer can we just expect a passive reception of information, especially as information and skills get more complicated. First presentation on AI. Our communication suites are going to be talking, on over ANW2, which is radio-based Wi-Fi that we project, over an AI integrated system, multi-platform. The Marines, sailors, everyone's going to have to get smarter and get better. There'll be a level of generalist that is necessary and specificity.
Just a general comment, we talk a lot about great power competition. I just want to feel a lot better about whether we're going to prevail or not. Just know we got to be served with such passion, creativity, and
Thank you, sir.
To say, I really appreciated your comments. Is to say I have to evaluate these. I try to make most of my such that they are based more on the critical option and in your mind of concepts that I'm trying to teach. If you can walk out understanding, that's my goal. One of the questions that I have for you as an educator here at MPS, I know the value of education and of mastery of concepts. How do you best communicate that? We're always crunched for content. Or in your case, of just having that resource, saying, hey, we need to go the extra mile for that full mastery.
That's a really good question. Obviously, as we've already discussed, adoption of any new technology in the DoD is probably the biggest hurdle. And adoption of this idea in particular changes jobs, changes roles, changes positions. I think the first step would be get it into one school. And if we can successfully implement and integrate it at Marine Corps Communications and Science School, or some methodology of AR, DR, whatever they deem appropriate for their course curriculum, and improve it through quantifying the value of return. Right now, train service members just enough so that they can go to the fleet and then actually learn their job. So arguably, some of the schoolhouses probably need not exist under that model, and only exist because they do exist. Contracts don't go very well. And I think if we can prove it once, and we can quantify it and we can show it. And more importantly, with the joint forces, radios, for example, everyone uses the same contracted DoD radios. It's either the 153, the 160, 117, 119. Doesn't matter. If one schoolhouse can do it with one type of radio suite, services don't boil down and hunker in on their technology suite, and circle the wagons, so to speak. We share it, and we partner schoolhouses across the branches that are teaching similar concepts or skills. So the best practices validated through data and learning outcomes, and cost benefit analysis there. And I think we're already trying to do that with the 21st century learning model, but I don't know enough about it yet, man, to speak on its effectiveness or how far. I think the medical core integration at San Antonio, Texas, for all the branches would be a good place to start. Hopefully I answered all the aspects of that question.
Just as a follow-up, I would love to urge you in this project that you really do quantify.
And with that sustained, because it's gaining what we learned and our skills, because everything in the DoD is incredibly low. The most, I think we can quantify it with introducing this test with units. Maybe other schoolhouses.
With that, I'd like to transition to the virtual panel, General Brown.
Michael, thanks for the presentation. I'm sure your dad and your grandfather are very proud. You can imagine my father was a Marine in Korea. He was very disappointed when I joined the Army. Yeah, I agree with you completely. PowerPoint should be illegal, right? Holy smokes, PowerPoint to death. I think you ought to think even broader, though. You mentioned it just a few minutes ago. Best practices across the services. There are some amazing things happening. I used to be in charge of training and education at Combined Arms Center Leavenworth and a couple other jobs in Maneuver Center. And take a look at the Army's synthetic training environment. That is a major effort. It takes not just equipment, but scenarios. So small units can be in situations, any terrain, anywhere in the world, practice at the level they need, something we've never had. And they use a lot of commercial off the shelf. So your idea is spot on and can expand. There's also for instruction, a lot of universities were using software and items that tailored it to the student more. So no student took the same path. And one of those we tried in the Army is through a thing called Cerego, C-E-R-E-G-O, worth looking into for you to expand a little more. Definitely the best ideas will come from the cutting edge. And so really appreciate you bringing this forward. And but I think you should go even bigger.
Thank you, sir. I will follow up with the Army suggestion. I know the Navy's doing some research into personalized learning methodologies.
And we also are plugged in with the STE CFT, sir, and they'll be getting his presentation after this. Director Jackson.
Yes, hi, hey, Michael, great presentation. And as a 20th century commo, I really appreciate all the radio references. So brings back fond memories. Hey, you went into a great amount of detail in sort of what I would see as training environments. And at the Krulak Center, we've had some presentations and some demos of some VR technology with the potential to use it inside education. And so, how do you see AR, VR, XR technology inside of some kind of education scenario? Have you thought of that?
Yes, ma'am. Specifically, the blended learning modalities is not. So we have to look at the efficacy of specific learning modalities. So certain things should be read, certain things should be taught and discussed using the Socratic method. Certain things are tactile and you need just repetition, where other things would be VR. So I think we have to look at the learning outcomes of the specific educational institution and that course in specific, and then work backwards from learning outcomes to the modalities that best fit those, and then work back and develop from there. Because there is no single solution. I know the DoD is going to love to just buy one thing and buy 100,000 of them and be done with it. That's probably not the correct answer, and it's going to be a combination of everything to achieve the greatest learning outcome in the least amount of time. And the nice thing about powered data, and actually Dr. Ming has done some of this, using unstructured data collected to determine learning outcomes. So the more modalities we introduce, the more data we collect. The more data that we collect, the more personalized learning we can create, and then achieve better learning outcomes through that. So the more integration would be better, actually, across every available platform.
I would just encourage you to have an education example in there too, to help sort of ignite the imagination of the people that you're presenting to on both fronts. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Ms. Rakonen.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for a super sharp presentation. I liked that you found ways that technology can enable modularity and scalability. I think what's exciting about that is that it creates agility and, I think not even just in training, I think this concept would scale well into other areas as well. So I'm really curious to see where you go with this in the farther future.
Thank you, ma'am. The Miguel Keith was commissioned this week, and it's the new ship for Expeditionary Advanced Space Operations. So I think hybrid logistics specifically would be able to help facilitate training and sustainment gaps, along with while simultaneously solving some of the logistic capabilities and niches. So it's leveraging the same equipment, platforms, and capabilities for multiple mission sets and demands. So I think there's scalability and applicability on for the training aspect of it, along with the warfighting side of the business.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. I'll also highlight that afterwards, there's an opportunity to talk with each of the presenters, and Mike will be more than happy to walk you through how to set up a radio for line of sight communication and have you a big T at the end of it, T for training. Next up, we have Lieutenant Sam Royster.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Now, one of my favorite things about being stationed here in Monterey is getting to enjoy some of the world's finest well-manicured golf courses. While I'm out there playing on these courses, it's increasingly common to see what used to be labor-intensive tasks requiring an army of greenskeepers now being accomplished by just a few unmanned systems. Engineers and landscapers have taken inspiration from Roomba and created autonomous lawnmowers that can accomplish the dull part of a greenskeeper's work, driving back and forth mowing the grass. These systems not only save the courses time and money, but they're more convenient. They have 24/7 availability, and they're cleaner than the gas lawnmowers they replace. Now, instead of playing on a well-manicured course like Pebble Beach, instead imagine trying to play a round of golf on a course that was only mowed once a year. It's pretty obvious that the amount of effort required to get the ball in the hole would make the game a whole lot less fun, and that any cost savings the course would realize by only paying a greenskeeper to come out once a year would not be worth the side effects. Unfortunately, mowing the grass once a year is the approach that the Navy takes combating marine biofouling. My name is Lieutenant Sam Royster, and I'm a Master's in Mechanical Engineering student, aspiring engineering duty officer, focusing on robotic controls and total ship systems engineering here at Naval Postgraduate School. Prior to coming to NPS, I served aboard the Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine in the USS Charlotte. I was stationed in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Looking down and walking across the bow and seeing a thick layer of algae and barnacles attached to the ship hull, it's a lived experience for me and all sailors. Performance decrements we saw when we were underway without a clean hull, despite having a nuclear reactor push us through the water, were immediately noticeable. Having to operate without a clean hull was frustrating from a readiness and safety perspective, because it limited how quickly we could get from A to B, the amount of fuel we burnt during each underway, and the maintenance that could be conducted when we were at port. Now, for those of you that are not intimately familiar with naval maintenance routines, the existing process for cleaning ship hulls is reactive. Divers enter the water and mechanically remove the buildup using high-speed rotating brushes, water jets, and other scraping tools. On average, the process takes 4 to 5 days, depending on the size of the ship. It happens once or twice a year. Remain the Navy's preferred biofouling mitigation tool due to its seemingly low cost of about $75,000 per ship per year. The unseen costs of this approach, however, are numerous. Biofouling creates hull drag and lead to a 10 to 20% increase in ship fuel consumption. Conservatively, for just a single destroyer, this means that annual fuel costs are $3 million higher than 20 million pounds of additional CO2 is emitted. The existing processes for reactive industrial cleaning are harmful to the hull coating as well, which is vital to preventing hull corrosion. The plate shown on the screen has just had 22 months of biofouling growth removed from it using industrial cleaning methods. The long time period between cleanings has led to that biofouling layer transitioning from soft slime into hard to remove barnacles and tube worms. And prying that hard scale off the hull results in damage to the paint layer, which not only introduces toxic metal particulates into the harbor environment, but it ultimately forces ships in the dry dock more frequently to be repainted. This antiquated and harmful process has impacts visible above the waterline as well. The former USS Kitty Hawk, the conventionally powered aircraft carrier that was decommissioned almost 12 years ago, is currently occupying one of only 2 dry docks in the world capable of accommodating our fleet of active nuclear aircraft carriers. It's been forced to go into dry dock prior to being towed to Texas and broken up for scrap because of a legal settlement the Navy recently agreed to. Washington State sued in 2017 following the industrial cleaning of the former USS Independence, alleging that the industrial cleaning process was causing excessive environmental harm to the harbor. The Navy agreed to a 10-year moratorium on cleaning all inactive ships in the Puget Sound area, and now paints active ships in the region with a different anti-fouling coating formulation. As Bridger already alluded to in his presentation, there's not enough shipyard capacity already as it stands, which leads to maintenance delays. So imagine if other states, including Hawaii, California, Virginia, or any state housing active ships took similar legal action. There is some good news though. There's an alternative to reactive cleaning, proactive cleaning, which is commonly called grooming. It's essentially taking a greenskeeper's approach to marine biofouling management, removing the fouling layer when it's just a soft slime that can easily be scrubbed away. Instead of using an army of divers like we do currently, we can use Roomba-like full cleaning vehicles to accomplish this. Proactive grooming has potential to save the Navy hundreds of millions of dollars annually in fuel costs and drastically reduce our environmental impact. It also has the potential to extend ship dry dock cycles. The whole plate shown on the screen has been groomed for a year. As you can see, there's none of that roughness or coating damage resulting from the cleaning process. It extended the paint life by up to 2 years, and because paint is the primary driver for ships entering dry dock, this would be a game changer for ship maintenance, planning, and execution. Investment in proactive grooming technology is in line with National Defense Strategy, U.S. Navy Unmanned Systems Roadmap, and Joint Artificial Intelligence Center development objectives, because it provides a relatively low-risk environment to refine and build trust in these nascent unmanned underwater systems. The technology needed to enable proactive hull grooming could later be applied to combat capabilities like harbor-based mine hunting and mine-laying vehicles. The field of robotic-assisted hull husbandry and inspection is on the cusp of adoption. Even today, several commercial outfits are marketing their own proactive grooming systems. In short, Navy can save hundreds of millions of dollars in operational fuel costs each year by shifting to this strategy, drastically reduces environmental impact, and extend the amount of time in between ship dry docking periods. If that's not enough, it also advances technologically adjacent combat capabilities and could provide similar benefits to the Coast Guard, Army, and military SEAL Command fleets. So I invite all of you to join me in our Always Clean Hull future. Thank you for your time and attention, and to NPS for allowing me the opportunity to present today. Any back for any questions?
So Sam, have you done a, get to Dr. Orr's question, comment, have you done a cost analysis, a cost estimate of the difference? Because that will be very compelling. So not only an environmental impact, cost.
So it's $80,000 a year to do the current existing methods, which is diver-centric, and then the benefit window is up to that $3 million a year in fuel cost savings. That's not even counting the environmental costs, which added on to that would probably be closer to like tens of millions that you're saving per ship per year.
So a cost analysis would be good to have with your work, because that would be very compelling to a lot of folks.
Yeah, so Naval Service Corps person, our Carter has already done the numbers for shifting just fuel costs, and I'm hoping to, as an extension to my thesis research, reading for a paper this summer, just extend that study from 2010 to include the environmental costs as well, because there's an increasing regulatory and environmental costs.
Does the concept of employment for these, every ship would have its own, so every time it went into port, it would mow a little grass?
So right now, because it can clean 60 square feet a second, or a minute, sorry, 60 square feet a minute, so you wouldn't need one for every ship. You'd need about 3 or 4 per harbor that the Navy is at. And it cleans about 85% of the surface area, so the 15% of hard to reach areas like the master belts or the running gear, so the propulsion train and the propellers, would still need divers at this point, or a specifically developed ROV that could then attack those areas, just because the autonomy in the system is not to that level yet where it can attack those hard to clean areas. But by cleaning 85% of the surface area, you can then free up those contract dive teams that currently do it to clean the running gear on all ships more frequently, enabling you to save those fuel benefits, minimize invasive species, and all that kind of stuff. So, technology right now is they've already proven that they can clean holes. So there's a team at Green Sea that has an active phase 2 STTR with ONR that has basically proven the proof of concept with a ROV cleaning head. They can clean the ship holes with 6 inches of accuracy over 500 feet in distance traveled. So they can basically mow the grass on the flat flat areas, I guess, of the ship. And they were working to minimize that the 85% or that last 15% they can't get. We're trying to minimize that with additional technology and then bring down the cost of the vehicle, because right now they're just using an off-the-shelf ROV instead of a mission-specific one. So it just has a lot more capability than is required for the mission currently. So bringing down the cost of the ROV would be the option after this phase 2 is complete.
One other question, this idea has already been presented to the Navy Sustainment Team and that.
So ONR's been working on this for about 10 years. The problem is that the phase 2 is completing in October, and they are looking for a community to take on that option, which requires a 50% cost share with ONR. And the not to speak poorly about my community and the engineering duty officers, but their reluctance to embrace this technology based on the fact that the existing contract is a single source contract for all Navy ships across the world. So one provider, so it's easy to execute, if not maybe the best solution. So they're kind of hesitant to, I think, upset that relationship by introducing this new technology on that provider. So, but I think that there's other benefits. Like, so inactive ships is also interested in this because they're the ones that are having to put that ship in dry dock, and every ship coming out of Puget Sound to get decommissioned is not going to have to do that. So it's already a huge maintenance problem for inactive ships. So they're looking into it in addition to the operation.
Although it's something just because I was inspired to think about it, you mentioned grooming Pebble Beach. Well, you also happen to be next to Salinas Valley, which is one of the world's leader in precision farming. Now, clearly, we're not hoping to cultivate the stuff that's growing on the outside of this stuff, but at the same time, I can imagine that some differential treatment of the outside of the hull, respecting that the bow edge is different than backside propulsion and so forth. Like, there are some ways in which the AI here could be advanced. And I know the core of your proposal is just one of, there's an obvious case for deploying an existing technology. But I actually look at this and I think, God, if we're deploying these things and we kicked off with a presentation of drone surveillance and issues around that, like, to me, there's an opportunity to roll a whole bunch of different tasks together. Every time a ship takes a break anywhere, deploying its own little bevy of drones to go out and do cleaning, very, very basic, if not maintenance, at least identifying issues. Like, this could be part of a whole deployment regular routine, even outside of home docks. So, I mean, to me, it's provocative in that it's the leading edge of a potential change in the way we treat the maintenance of the crafts in general.
Yeah, the more maintenance you can ship waterborne rather than dry docking is equal tens of millions of dollars saved and man hours and days in dry that asset is unavailable.
I have also hired divers to go down with rebar and clear out intake pipes for an abalone farm in Santa Cruz, and even done it myself. I don't know that that's a job we need to pay people to do, if we can get a machine to do it instead.
Oh, that was really cool. Being also deputy director for Cruiser for mixing ocean and really cool to me. So I was curious if you plan in this any kind of data management, not only keeping track of when and frequency of doing this, but also state of the hull as things are being cleaned and monitoring of areas that can't be cleaned, mostly for the potential in the future of recognizing timing and frequencies of.
Yeah, so the existing process is almost 100% qualitative, not quantitative, in the data you get. Divers go down and look at it, and assess a fouling rating, and then that pushes either you get an interim cleaning of just the running gear, a full ship cleaning, or nothing, right? So then idea with these systems is that you can then get some qualitative data in it. So the existing system that Green Sea is developing uses the way that it navigates it with sonar. So you can use that sonar image of the hull, which actually is strong enough to like get those well beats and that kind of stuff. So you could actually then be monitoring where fouling is growing fastest, or other different things with just that the sonar technology. And the eventual idea would be to incorporate additional inspection technologies so you could be able to measure paint thickness, that kind of stuff, as well as the project being worked on at NPS for the the name now. I forget, but it's a technology that basically can look through the elastomer layer on submarine hulls and look and see if the glue is still holding. So that's a big problem in submarine ports, is that the sound isolation coating just falls off the hull. So they're trying to figure out a way to monitor that more in situ so you can attack those problems and correct it prior to it falling off on deployment. So that is also a technology that could be either incorporated on this vehicle, or if there's payload concerns on another vehicle, just using the technology you've already created on drive down the hull. Very high accuracy.
That's a really good point about the sound isolation. As you've seen in Pearl Harbor, lots of ships are coming back, especially the Virginia class, without coating place. You can deal with that problem too. That'd be a huge leap forward, because for some reason we can't figure out how to get this stuff to here properly. The other thing about the data is that it's different every port, right? I mean, some places the fouling is much more severe based on the temperature of the water and the port dynamics than others, especially places that are warm like Pearl Harbor, opposed to cold like Bangladesh.
Yes, sir. So that's what my thesis research is focusing on, the building a temperature-based model for deployment of these systems. So most of the research has been done at Florida Institute of Technology for validating that proactive grooming does not do that damage to the hull coating layer and that it can increase the paint. And then in Monterey, I'm going to be repeating a study that they did in 2017 that basically is going to encapsulate most of the rest of the temperature range for all U.S. Navy ports. And then we could say that, hey, if we can clean every month here instead of every week that they have to do in Florida, then it makes the purchasing decision a lot easier for NAVSEA when they eventually have to deploy these. And when you revise the NSTM to say like how frequently you should be doing water temperature. So that's what my thesis is working on. And then we have an NRP proposal in for fiscal year 2022 to look at submarine-specific coatings as well as the sonar dome rubber window on surface ships. That has not been evaluated, and due to the dystrophy nature of that formulation, FIT can't perform that research. So NPS is a perfect outcome. We have the opportunity to follow on to my research with some additional things to prove that submarine coatings can be cleaned by this as well without doing damage to that.
With that, I'd like to transition to the virtual panel. General Brown.
Sam, that's really impressive. I love your golf analogy, and the overgrown green that seemed normal to me with my slice. I'm in the rough all the time. The only part. Hey, with the savings, fuel cost savings, the environmental impact, I'm amazed this isn't out there already. I'd invest in it now. And I'm counting on Admiral Fargo. I think he can get this Navy-wide.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Director Jackson.
Yeah, just quickly, Sam, that was great. And, I'm a big fan of my home Roomba. So I can only imagine how the U.S. Navy would feel about this machine out and helping out the fleet. Do you have any use cases for any allies or partners that are using this technology, albeit on a smaller scale than the U.S. Navy would need? Thanks.
So the commercial solutions that are out there right now, there's 2 companies that use magnetic wheels to affix the robot to the hull, but that is a non-starter for the Navy based off of the not wanting to magnetize the hull as well as the sensitive electronic equipment below the waterline. So that kind of makes those commercial technologies that like Maersk Shipping is investing in, and there's a company called Jotun that is partnered with Kongsberg Maritime that is deploying these systems in Europe. But we needed a specific one for the Navy that uses negative pressure to attach itself to the hull just to get rid of that magnetic problem. So the vehicle developed at Green Sea uses negative pressure to attach to it, and then the tread they've actually evaluated for minimum damage to Navy-specific hull coatings. So that's kind of the onus for developing our own unique solution.
And Ms. Reconin.
The solution, it just seems so simple. I am appalled to hear that it might be an existing contract that stands in the way of adopting something like this. Because my question was going to be, why is this not already a thing? So, I might myself go out there and write an angry op-ed or similar. But I think your presentation was, wonderful. It picked a technology, that exists in the commercial sector and then needs a version of it for military use. Your tie-ins with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center's objectives, and then seeing this as a bridge to additional capabilities was really smart too. So yes, I will cool down, but those are my initial thoughts there.
Okay, with that, we have our last presentation. I'm assuming everybody's going to be able to stay for this. I know we lost Dr. Denning. He had a prior engagement that conflicted after 1330. But with that, as long as everybody else is good to go, Captain Ben Cohen. Thanks.
August 2024. Logistics attachments in Western Africa, supporting the Theater Special Operations Committee. This should be the operational assignment of a lifetime for young logisticians. We're in the Angolan capital, Luanda. The situation here is tense. Private Chinese companies began to arrive following a $60 billion African aid package announced by Beijing in 2018. They followed that with an additional $1 billion Belt and Road Infrastructure Development Plan. Since 2020, China's been Africa's biggest trade partner, topping $200 billion per year. I haven't been briefed on everything, but I do know that special operations teams are assessing the influence that these private Chinese companies have on the infrastructure development of Rwanda in exchange for Angolan oil. While not as pronounced as Ethiopia's strategic partnership with Beijing, Angola is gaining momentum. From a logistician's perspective, however, that's not the most concerning piece. Every time I look towards the sky, I'm reminded of it. Floating over the city are gargantuan airships. Most that pass by have Mandarin printed on the sides of their gas-filled envelopes, while some have Russian, French. Their cargo gondolas, they carry precious metals, recently mined rare earth materials, construction equipment, supplies. Some can carry more than 100 tons, 20% more than a C-17. I'm reminded that these beasts afford the Chinese unrestricted access to the most remote locations on the planet, and with it, the bounty of resources in those hard-to-reach locations. The airship's impact on the global economic stage cannot be overstated, and it has come about in less than 18 months. As I stand in the city, I see an airship resting right on the shore of the Atlantic, the bulk of its body settled right on the water, offloading its cargo straight onto the beach. The fact that it needs no infrastructure sparks just a small twinge of jealousy. Even though it's offloading equipment that is clearly labeled as the People's Liberation Army, I cannot help but admire the simplicity that this mobility platform grants to our foe. As I turn my attention back to planning for our next aerial resupply, which will take place 40 miles outside the city, try not to fixate why there isn't a single U.S. military airship anywhere near this continent. So, today, in the age of hypersonic missiles, autonomous littoral surface ships, and electric vertical takeoff and landing taxi services, I want to talk about a concept of orbital fixed-wing flight. I'd like to talk specifically about hybrid airships, which are different from all other light-of-the-air vehicles. They are hybrid due to a combination of lift generation and vector thrust propulsion. This unique design affords some incredible payload capacities and operational ranges that will make any logistician jealous. Because it can take off and land in relatively short distances, if not vertically, no runway is needed, just a reasonably flat surface. Hybrid airships are not new to the DoD. In fact, between 2007 and 2012, we invested well over $1 billion across 6 different hybrid airship programs. Sequestration hit, funding was cut, and the concept deflated. It's fair to say that the DoD did not get much out of that investment, but the commercial sector did. They forged ahead without DoD funding. Their initiative is now our opportunity to unlock the progress of the commercial sector. Hybrid airships are viewed by many as a critical platform to fill the gap that exists in transportation mobility today. That gap exists between very slow but inexpensive surface shipping and fast but very expensive air transport. It's a very large market segment to capture, and the global race is on. Hybrid airships are considered a low-end platform. They travel at 3 or 4 times the speed of surface ships, but they travel at about the third of speed of military aircraft, which are considered high-end platforms. The truth, though, is that the commercial sector wants these low-end platforms. Amazon, FedEx, Maersk Shipping, ConocoPhillips have all taken steps to be early adopters. In addition to very low operational costs and low maintenance costs, the endurance of hybrid airships is not measured in hours, it's measured in weeks. In fact, humans are the limiting factor, which is why fully autonomous versions are currently in development. They also emit 75% less carbon than their aircraft counterparts. There are 20 companies currently across the globe that are developing hybrid airship variants. US and UK companies are expected to come to market in mid to late 2023 with their fully certified passenger and cargo variants. Now, these first production models will carry 10 to 20 tons of payload. 50 to 100 ton variants are expected sometime around 2028. When fully electric or hydrogen fuel cell powered versions come to market in the next 5 to 7 years, it's going to become very difficult to deny the opportunity generated by these aircraft. There is a French firm that is also working to develop their technology and come to market. 25% of this company is currently owned by the aviation industry core of China. In addition to their investment in the French firm, China is developing its own hybrid airships. Russia is doing the same. So how do we unlock this technology? We contract as a service with the commercial sector. We demonstrate our interest in becoming early adopters ourselves, and we send a demand signal to multiple commercial segments that this is a technology that we want to see push forward. In exchange, we allow the wealth and speed of the commercial sector to push forward the research, development, and further adoption of this aircraft. The commercial sector has given us an opportunity to rapidly exploit and expand on the technology that we need much sooner rather than later. In 2010, the United States Army purchased 3 unmanned intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance hybrid airships to be used over the battlefield of Afghanistan. But because of sequestration, we missed out on a decade's worth of this enduring capabilities development. Our peers in the great power continuum are not waiting, and their influence with this very platform will be felt soon. We cannot afford to let this gargantuan opportunity go by us again. My name is Captain Ben Cullen. I'd like to thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
So how about the trade-offs? I'm just trying to watch this trade-off between strategic lift and obviously maritime lift and the time pieces. So the airship, if you look at it from 20-foot equivalent units, how many could an airship this size carry?
Very simple and excellent question, sir. So a 20-ton variant, for instance, very close to what a C-130. So that is essentially one 40-foot by 8-foot by 8.5-foot standard ISO. When we start talking about 50-ton variants, you're looking at roughly 3 of those in one space. In fact, most of the leaders in the industry are building their cargo gondolas within that specification, the ability to stack 3 within the cargo gondola. Get over 100 tons, and there are designs actually in place for 500 tons and 1,000 tons that we are currently pursuing. Now you're looking at pretty tremendous capacity. The trade-off in a lot of this is that some companies want to be able to load directly in the cargo gondolas, and some want to be able to just pick up an aircraft. So there are multiple companies that are looking at this from different angles. One other piece to add is that there's 3 types of airships: non-rigid, semi-rigid, and rigid. Depending on the style of design, there are different ways that you can So with non-rigid, it's a little bit better to drive towards a gondola or being carried within the aircraft itself. For semi-rigid affords some different opportunities. Start to get into a long conversation about ballast control at that point, sir, and that takes it down a very deep path. That answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's just, there is this no man's land between the lift and the maritime lift. You can fill that, and also just on the battery space. I mean, look at these 53s lifting big stuff and moving it to a different area of the battlefield. The way we've done it in the past, whether you can replicate that lift capability.
I truly believe that we can. There's a lot of unexplored opportunity, especially if we look at adoption of this technology within the first leg of logistics and not necessarily. In essence, the ripple effects of adopting this now would release our high-end strategic platforms like C-17s to be at the front of their action. That's a gap that I see for us because the maintenance requirements losing out. And on the receiving end of not having lift when I needed it, I understand that. There's just not enough demand.
So that begs the question in that if technology is being worked on and developed, we know it's out there, and one of your arguments is let's get to the business of doing some work with partners. What have you thought about with regard to the concepts? How does this look when it comes to really operating these forces or airships, behind? What's the concepts?
That's an excellent question, David. It actually is very expansive. So I focus almost exclusively on mobility. Again, there are multiple branches we can go. But in mobility concepts, what I envision is that these platforms as contracted services support major exercises. An easy example is Marines that need to go from Camp Pendleton to 29 Palms or need to go to Bridgeport, California. We are able to cut out a lot of the middleman in that point. And so where I think that relates is as we contract as a service and we validate this capability and give some feedback, 10 to 20 tons isn't much. What we want to get to that 50 ton. That's that, and then really the 100 ton variant is where we are making real progress. And so in the early stages, what I believe our plan is to try some smaller contracted movements as compared to our surface or looking at even household goods or PCS. And understand what we can do, understand those concepts of employment, and go from there. I've wargamed and modeled quite a few on my own, but I'm very ambitious. So with the trade-offs of what's real and what's not, I think if we look at contracting as a service, we can validate that concept. But we can also use
The idea of household goods coming over my house.
A follow-up question to the chaos with respect to doing things. What are the operational ships as being fairly ruggedized for large cargo airplanes being available for larger wind? Are there operating restrictions, and if so, how might that impact?
Yes, ma'am. It's an excellent question. So it would depend on which commercial producer you would be talking about, but I can say that for the organizations that have had a chance to speak to, if a 767 can survive the environment, the hybrid airship can survive. So don't want to fly into a hurricane, that would be a bad idea. But these aircraft are specifically being designed to operate at 70 knots or more, which is agreed upon speed to get past bad weather, or at least maneuver around it. Additional considerations, and one of the things that I'm focusing on is deployment of the Arctic. So we need a consistent geophysical survey capability, and this is a platform that instead of one overflight or trying to put people on the ice, we potentially have something in the air for 21 days. Very, very consistent readings, data collection, monitoring that we can push back. So they're being designed to survive in that environment. When we talk about heat, we start to get into mass expansion and contraction. And that again takes us down a very deep road in the technical conversation, which is some aircraft are being designed to be able to release or recompress the buoyant gas that they use. Others are relying on that non-rigid form and just be aware of what your ballast constraints would be. So if you land need to take on ballast depending on the applicant. Folks who are most interested in this are the Canadian miners, because they have to get those remote locations. Same thing with going north, the largest copper mine in the world, untapped currently. To build a road there would be $2 billion. This is the potential. Because it can survive. It was a very interesting experiment. It was done in the 1960s. We had an airship that stayed over the North Atlantic for, I believe it was 60+ days, no problems. So it survived in a pretty unpleasant environment and had consistent collecting speed. So they're very durable. The last point I'd add, man, is they're not like a balloon. You don't pop them and they explode. The PSI in the non-bridges is about 0.2. So if there is a hole, the air leakage is very, very slow. U.S. Army and the World Defense Forces tried very hard to destroy these things. A lot of experiments in like 2007, 2008. They took 2,000 or 3,000 rounds of 50 pounds, kept going for several hours until they actually hit the ground. And when they hit the ground, it's more like a soft bump as opposed to a catastrophic. Great question.
There appears to be a fairly around the Arctic. Who's the sponsor?
I haven't had a chance to push that far, sir. I'm aware that Air Force Futures Command is having some conversations with a private vendor about some development options. They're looking at I believe, a fully rigid version. I am at the stage in my conversation where I'm just feeling confident enough to reach out to some other commands and have that conversation. Because of the focus on the Arctic and the new interest in gathering more information, the hope is that we might be able to engage with Will or Northcom Europe to be able to look at that more. Army is still interested, I believe, sir. Don't know that the Marine Corps will dive into it just yet. It's a little bit outside of our scope. And my offer is to be the lead adopter for the Marine Corps. My hope is that it is a joint exercise. At this point, sir, I'm open to everything.
You got some work with transfer.
Given this development commercial space, have you talked about maybe defense innovation unit as far as identify maybe the right commercial product or products along with it, commercial capabilities?
So to be fair, that conversation for me is just starting right now. So I'm just strategizing to cross the valley of death. Not get stuck in the early stages, but yes, sir. So I have contacts at DIU who have expressed interest in looking. And we actually are very fortunate to have Transcom as well. Transcom has explored this before. And DIU has kind of looked at it. DARPA has done a lot of work like this in the past. But again, open to suggestions, sir. How places are.
I'm an advisor for. Hopefully, we'll have a new job here soon. But really, really fascinating. Fantastic.
With that, unless there's
Just super quick, and it's just sort of a clarification in a way. I mean, so there is demand, not coming from any of these organizations, but you know, if 1.8 million people employed by Amazon have shown an interest, then you know someone is exploring building this stuff, and clearly external demand in other countries. So there's progress being made moving forward. So I get that it's a real shift to have some aspect of the U.S. military make a commitment, but is it a commitment towards building a specialized vehicle that meets the needs that are unique here, or is it just it's moving too slowly and we need to accelerate things?
That's an excellent question, man. So I think that what that leads into is the models that are coming to market. It depends on the company you talk to. One company, rather prominent, is very focused on the mobility industry. They see the best at being capturing that mobility segment that I discussed earlier. But there is another company that has its roots in DoD investment. So their focus is ISR capabilities. So as I'm just learning, it's the opportunity to look at how we use contracting as a service for mobility is an easier road. However, the ISR platforms that are coming are also coming with significant strike packages attached. They're not static collection platforms. So there are multiple levels, and I wanted to make sure my ducks were completely in a row before I dove down that path. And I do not come from that part of the ISR world, so I wanted to be careful about where I think the win is for us is the mobility contracting as a service. However, as the ISR platforms come on board from this one company in particular, and they are engaging DoD, although they haven't told me exactly who, I believe we're going to see that come faster because that model specifically can be available very quickly.
And is China doing more than moving around infrastructure to remote parts of Angola? Are they looking at more than just mobility as well?
As I understand it, yes, ma'am.
With that, transition to General Brown.
Ben, that was a terrific presentation. Did give me a flashback of when I was in Iraq and had to send a unit to chase an untethered Intel ISR blimp that was headed for Iran. And chase it down in strikers and stop it from heading to Iran. Kind of crazy. But yeah, I think we ought to leverage the commercial interest in this. I certainly would have, I could see a ton of uses for this in the Indo-Pacific in particular with the tyranny of distance. Not enough Army watercraft to move folks around and equipment that the Marines need and the Army needs on all the islands and so forth. And these would be very, very effective. I think that one of the challenges will be, you know, with flat budgets, which service is going to take this on? Who should take it on? They all may kind of want parts of it, and it might benefit Army and Marine the most on the ground, but you know, but their logistics responsibilities in the Army, et cetera. But I'm not sure they're going to want to take it on. But I think it's a great idea. We ought to leverage a commercial interest and has great application.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I think to the general's point earlier, one of the things that I find most powerful about this is that I did my last 2 deployments in Indo-PACOM and was constantly struck by the lack of transportation that was available. Like my battalion sat and did nothing for well over 30 days because we could not get a high-speed vessel or a C-130 allocated to support our movements. And so a simple vignette in this case in Indo-PACOM would be for an infantry battalion that arrives on Camp Hansen, Okinawa. There's a very large space right next to the motor pool. One of these aircraft can land, load up the bulk of the battalion's equipment, and transition straight to the Korean Peninsula to Camp Story or Camp Rodriguez, deliver, come back, and do all of that in less than 10 hours. And so we're going to cut down the time that our troops are stagnant and take the load off some of those vessels that are required for strategic movements. And again, releasing some of the effort that's put onto our high-end platforms like C-130s and C-17s.
Yeah,
Those guys at CENTCON sucked up all the lift.
With that, we'll go to Director Jackson.
General Brown, sir, for what it's worth, I vote the Army takes this on and the Marine Corps will benefit. So Ben, great presentation, great intro. I think you have a future beyond the Marine Corps in acting, perhaps. And so keep it up. That really was a great attention grabber. You've touched on this idea of sort of security and protection a little bit around the fringes, and I don't know if it goes, you know, into the classified realm. Obviously, you won't say it if it does, but how do you protect these things? It's one thing to protect them in Iraq and Afghanistan from, say, you know, elementary ground fire, but how do you protect these against a peer, really? Thanks.
Yeah, there's one kind of interesting consideration. So for non-rigid airships, they actually have an incredibly small radar cross-section. If you compare against, again, a C-130 or a C-17, it's actually extremely small. Despite the fact they are massive, most of that is a passable material. So part of what I believe is the appropriate adoption plan is to not pitch this as a frontline system and not to pitch it as one that will be equated to A, the Hindenburg, or B, a very large floating target. So coastal defense opportunities and then requisite mobility tests within the U.S., I think, are the place to start. as we move forward with this. There's going to be a whole host of issues that come towards that survivability and the protection that you're discussing here. And I don't have the best answer for it yet, but I also know that at least 2 of the companies I've spoken to, and they're developing their ISR platforms, are developing their own defensive capabilities with the aircraft. So there are some unique pieces that can be added on. It's not necessarily on the high side, but given that we are broadcasting publicly, I don't necessarily want to hand off trade secrets yet.
And next up, Ms. Rakonik.
Thank you for your presentation. Part of what I found so interesting about this concept is that it has applications, not just for defense, but for diplomacy and development as well. So I think it could be like, yes, there's this institutional food fight about who's responsible and who has the resources, but could have farther reaching effects. And I think to follow on an earlier comment about leveraging the commercial space, it could also be an interesting flagship concept for how the department can then actually influence the commercial space. I mean, ATMs wouldn't work and DC would not be covered in Lime scooters if we didn't have a space program and GPS. So, thinking about transportation is something that's really foundational. It'll be interesting to see some of the knock-on effects.
Yes, ma'am, I would agree. And the one that I would add to that, which is kind of an interesting caveat for the global health community and humanitarian assistance disaster relief, platforms afford a very unique approach to some of the organizations who are trying to do good. As we partner with those organizations to continue our influence around the world, doing good for people where it's needed, I think these platforms are going to afford some opportunities to support in ways we had not considered before. So it's just a caveat, but you're absolutely right, ma'am. I look forward to exploring that more.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
That was the last presentation. At this point, I'd just like to transition for any closing comments. We'll work through in reverse protocol order. So Ms. Rakonen, back at you.
Thank you. And thanks so much again for having me today for some really fascinating presentations. Overall, I was struck by the sheer pragmatism of all of these proposals and also the range. We had everything from, how do we assess the enemy's vote in AI, revolutionizing mobility ecosystems, still cannot get over the hull Roomba. It just seems like a no-brainer. And then also institutional elements as well, like training, career pathways, and cross-regional diplomacy. On a personal note, I do want to thank you all. No one said, let's just add quantum to something we're already doing. So always a sign of a productive conversation when that doesn't happen. In terms of some of the challenges, most presenters and many of my co-panelists had noted that bureaucratic inertia will continue to be a barrier. So I was excited to see that a lot of presentations addressed some of these factors and then also looked at, how to actually upgrade some of these things or even translate successful processes like Kessel Run. Again, thank you for these really thoughtful, really interesting big ideas, and I really look forward to seeing what comes of them.
Awesome, thank you. And Director Jackson.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'll just harken back to my my opening remarks. I mean, what you saw on display was a great example of the talent that we have inside the Department of Defense and the ideas, given the proper overhead and the resources, what our service members can do. So I'm just blown away. I continue to be blown away by young officers and enlisted that are just bringing these ideas to the table, to senior leadership, to actually do something with. So I say to all the presenters, well done, continue pushing, and please continue to stay in the fight. Thanks.
Back here in the room to Colonel Lyons.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to all the presenters. One of the things that I think really came out, and I like the word that one of the other panelists used, which was pragmatic. And I think in our own verbiage, it's applied. The ability to take what you've learned and then apply it to the problem sets that we have in the DoD. The other piece that I come away with is we can't afford not to do some of these things. That we basically had an open checkbook for a long time, and in an era of declining budgets, there's actually going to be more opportunities based on your big ideas rather than less. We can't afford to continue to waste money on fuel that we could, recapture if we just had the whole Roomba or, Bridger, your example of, better shipyard maintenance. So again, I think this is the future. The other piece that I would say, a friend of mine works in Europe, and he's with a major maritime shipping company. And if we don't adopt some of these things, we may not be allowed to operate in parts of the world because of the environmental considerations and the inability to partner with them. So again, I think this is something critical for not just today, but our relationships in the future. Thanks.
Captain Clum?
I'm going to unashamedly make a commercial. Quality as these presentations were, I wasn't impressed. Why? Because I've been here for 20 years now. And every quarter, we get quality ideas like this. And this is the result of what residential education combined with cutting-edge research produces. Incubator that can also take to actual field experimentation. This is FPS, and this is where we should be sending officers.
Thank you, sir. That, Dr. Morrison.
Yeah, thank you again for the invitation to be here. It was a really interesting experience. I enjoyed all of the presentations. I echo what Jeff said regarding all of the educational experiences that we foster here. I think of all of these awesome ideas and the potential for there to be so many more by fostering this level of innovation.
Dr. Phelps?
Thanks, no, thanks for the chance to join. You might work a lot with elementary medicine at Stanford. I have to know all those quotes, and one of them is, when you're in a gunfight, bring all your friends with guns. And this is a great example. We need our friends with guns. Like the innovation that's happened here. Got to do more to bring that to the table. I think one of our lost opportunities is not creating more opportunities for our best and brightest and most innovative, creative. You guys do amazing work bringing more to light. I've seen it in the university setting. You get these 100-pound brains out of Stanford and other universities. The chance to work on these problems is amazing. Got to do more like this and bring more people to the table. I think American exceptionalism. I think it's real. It's not Americans. It's just the environment here that I live in Silicon Valley off Stanford campus. Something special about that ecosystem. And you can really leverage these resources. Congratulations, everyone who presented. I'm super psyched. It's a great power competition. I think we can prevail if we do play our A team and they want us to.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ming?
All right, there's three things I wanted to say. And the first is, I thought most of these ideas, all of them, sold themselves. I mean, the big thing for me sitting here is you're pitching new ideas. Like, why aren't every one of those already in practice? And that's going to be my third point, just to come back to that. The middle one, I'm going to throw it out there, just because I think this needs to get said every now and then. U.S. military is a lot more diverse than the guys that made the pitches here. And I'm glad that you were here pitching these ideas, but I hope the big idea next year, one, involves a lot more kinds of people, but also maybe someone's got a big idea about how to really bridge the diversity innovation paradox here in the US military. But the last one is, I recently got recruited by X, and my job there would be to work for Astro in taking new ideas. So this is, used to be called Google X, it's their innovation thing. Is to take the new ideas, and my job would be to actually turn them into mature companies. And I got the sense here that this is a thing which is, you guys are going to pitch a bunch of ideas. Many of you are going to go out and do something else. Hopefully you excited someone and they might carry it through. But it feels like there's an opportunity here for an additional role, a maturation process that would explicitly take a great idea and bring it out into the world. Because I'll tell you, I get pitched startup ideas, hundreds of them every year, and the vast majority of them, doesn't matter how good they are, they virtually all of them die because they can't mature from an idea into a practice that other people want to do. And so adding that into this process, I think, would be a huge thing.
So I agree that this is a great group. The difference between them and most of our students is that they had the courage to be recruited and say, yeah, okay, we'll do this. So I thank you very much for for saying yes when you were asked. This, to just point, it happens every day. I get a chance to listen to students and faculty a lot, and it is always impressive. Sometimes it's better than others. That's what learning is all about, huh? And the fact that we could become more diverse, I agree, but there is diversity of thought, and that's really important. And there's also here a remarkable ability for peer challenge. The conversation that occurs amongst the students and the challenge each other is real. It's authentic. So this kind of thing is absolutely what we live every day. So this is a great opportunity for us to understand ourselves and what we can do. And to your point, one that we're trying to do with NWSI is carry it over to the next place. And you heard some accountability here. The 4-star, the 3-star, we are going to talk about how we then help them bring these ideas forward. Some will die, some will die, some won't. And so that's what we do. And we are proud to be here today. The big ideas of what we do a lot. And bringing the operational student, then someplace, we're going to go someplace, and the accountability on either end of that is a remarkable gift that we have. We do that. And thank you all for your investment. Without you, it's just not as cool. And so I thank you very much for what you have given us as leaders, both those out in the virtual screen and also those who are here. We thank you on behalf of the students and the faculty and staff very, very much for your investment.
Thank you, ma'am. Earl Boosie.
So I start off with some thanks. Thanks to Admiral Rondeau on letting the Air Force Navy. Thanks for the partnership that we just codified in a. We're really excited about that continued relationship that we have with TRACCOM. So I wrote down, some notes on the centers, and we have some themes that resonated with me. So AI and machine learning, the universal, DevSecOps, essential, trans-regional and global, not going to get anything done in the world that we have ahead of us if we don't what we're institutionally trained to think about. Commercial off-the-shelf technologies, they pay for themselves. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians today learn differently. You have to do it faster and cheaper. And unfortunately, the department is not fast or cheap. So if we don't use costs, we're going to lose. Autonomous systems, way to the future, underpinning of resilience and sustainability are all themes that we need. You can take the topic away, but if you have those foundational themes, absolutely essential. I guess I'll finish with where I started is intellectual energy that's improved. Absolutely. Our future. That's right. Another common theme that we all kind of danced around was the bureaucratic resistance in services in the department actually instituted. Thought that you might want to consider for next year is fighting virtually or in person. Vice Chairman, who is responsible for the Joint Requirements Oversight, has the authority, Title 10, direct the services to explore new ideas and new concepts and new capabilities. Having the Vice Chairman as a sponsor for one of the big ideas, probably paid.
It's a great idea. Matter of fact, the current one and a couple of past ones too. Is a good idea.
Yep.
We had contact with a couple of them. Good idea. Generally, we'll do that.
And then Admiral and General Brown, it's good to see you, and all the other panelists. Thanks for letting me be part of this.
Yes, sir. Jumping over to the virtual, General Brown.
Well, thanks for letting an Army guy participate. Really appreciate that. What impressive ideas and impressive leaders. And I agree with the statement earlier. We can't afford not to implement these ideas. It's a great example of how key it is, the investment in people, getting them that education there and that investment. Never easy, but boy, is that worth it, and a great example. And finally, to the presenters, I just say they just can't let the bureaucracy get them down, stay after it, and really encourage. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Buzz, Admiral Fargo.
Yeah, there's advantages in seniority, but disadvantages when you're last is anything left to say or maybe remember for that matter. Yeah, this was a tremendous experience, and I really appreciate all the folks that presented, and I'm sure we just saw, 6 folks out of the legion of people that are really doing fabulous work and generating lots of good ideas. A couple things that struck me. One, on the 2 submariners, I really appreciate that it was particularly rewarding problems that I was not able to solve for the last 40 years. You guys have come up with solutions. And I mean, little things that pass my first test on maybe every startup is, what's the unmet need that you're trying to solve? And I mean, cutting the grass on a submarine this has been happening since Dick O'Kane was the CEO of Tang. So these are really, lots of people said practical solutions, but they're really practical solutions. And I would encourage you to move forward in that vein. And to that extent, we talked about, the trying to get to the valley of death and the bureaucratic nature of our acquisition processes. I would really encourage you to find an operational champion for each of these efforts, because I think the operators have a sense of urgency. The acquisition system for all the federal acquisition regulations would fill this room, right? So I really think you got to get the operators to adopt this and help you move it forward, because I think you'll have more success that way. I also resonated with the logistics piece on the kind of the Amazon approach. I mean, Amazon will get this airship built and operational before the view graphs have been built in the Pentagon. So you really need to lock up with those folks as soon as you can, and use that as a vehicle to get things like the airship moving, because in the Pacific, and Bob knows this well, biggest warfighting issue right now is being able to handle the logistics piece to support the fight. And whether it's Admiral Davidson or before him Admiral Harris, they will all sign up to that. And of course, that's not necessarily the best resource area that we have in our continuum here. So if you can find a commercial solution like that to solve this logistics problem, then you got to go for it. And I don't know, I didn't ask the question, but I don't know what the price per flying hour for that airship is, but you ought to know what that is compared to an H-53 moving something, or a C-130 or something like that, so you can make the compelling case that this is the way to solve this problem. And then the last thing is just I can't imagine how much y'all work doing this. You learn things that are, you're going to go off and into jobs as, department heads in the Navy and company officers, battalion officers, and so on. The number of hurdles you had to knock down to get to this point is going to be tremendously valuable to you, no matter what you do. So, and thanks to you and the opportunity you set up for these folks to work in this kind of environment. Practical education is just valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Kelly, thank you. So to all of those who are here, Lieutenant Colonel McCoy got this job on an Audible just a few weeks ago, right?
6 weeks ago.
Yeah, okay. So he pulled this off because he was not doing this. So thank you for your own leadership.
Thank you, man.
Great job.
And that also reflects the work that these gentlemen put in, especially with Mike Gannon and his baby, his radio. I mean, he built that throughout this process, and it was really hard to not have him just demonstrate and teach you guys how to use a radio as a kid. That's what he wanted to do last week.
That he wanted to teach Vice Chief how to build one. He said, "No, do that, man."
And in closing, I just want to give some thank yous. I had to write this out because there have been so many people. It's been a real team effort to execute this. And so first, obviously with the panel members, thank you very much for your time. And if you have hunger pains or any bladder issues because of this, I apologize. The audio-visual team, the live stream team, thank you very much for working with us. It was pretty chaotic to the last moment, but I knew, from talking to you guys are professionals through and through, so thank you very much for making this seamless. We had the PAO and marketing team develop the programs and get this publicized for our live stream audience to plug in. Trulock Center, thank you also for helping to plug us and to be a part of this. Major Jared Cooper was exceptional, so thank you very much. And the NPS Foundation for supporting this. The student planning team, which we only have one remaining, the other PCS, but without them, I probably would not be married right now. And then the last thing is NPS leadership. Thank you very much for giving me the room to maneuver. I was able to execute how I like to execute, which is move out, draw fire, start getting shot in the face, so you better get out of the way. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to next year. For those on the live stream, we'll have VIX 22, and while you've heard it here that these big ideas are, some of them are going to die. That's a sad truth. What this is about is getting those ideas out here and into action. And I really appreciate the comments about bringing in the vice chairman to focusing on operators as sponsors, because we've had many conversations as we've gone through these pitches to try to find the best way to help it not just be a pitch, but as a stepping stone to something more. I'm hoping that we'll be able to move on.
So here's a task for next year, 22. I'm going to go to 19, even during COVID 20 and 21, and have a session on what happened next on the next page. Right? So the follow-up for each of the projects. 19. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.